The email arrived that Professor Marcus Williams stared at his phone screen, barely awake, wondering if he was dreaming. From Sarah Chen, Tesla Communications. Subject, urgent. Mr. Musk requests your presence. Professor Williams, Elon Musk has made a discovery that will change Christianity forever. He specifically requested your expertise. A private jet is waiting at Reagan National Airport. Please come to Austin, Texas immediately. What we found will shock the world. Time sensitive. Please confirm. Marco sat up in bed, his heart pounding. His wife Nicole stirred beside him. What's wrong? I I don't know. Elon Musk wants to meet with me. Something about a discovery. The Elon Musk? Why would you want to meet a history professor at 3 in the morning? Marcus reread the email, focusing on one phrase, will change Christianity forever. His grandmother Ruth's voice echoed in his mind, words she'd spoken to him 30 years ago when he was just a boy. Baby, the truth always finds its way to the light. Always. He typed back, I'll be there. 3 hours later, Marcus stepped off a private jet in Austin, Texas, still confused about why he'd been summoned. A woman in professional attire met him on the tarmac. Professor Williams, I'm Sarah Chen. Mr. Musk is waiting. We need to get you to the press conference. Press conference? What press conference? Sarah's expression was unreadable. You'll see. The whole world is about to see. She led him into a building filled with hundreds of reporters, cameras, and confused faces. And Marcus found a seat in the third row, his notebook trembling in his hands. Then Elon Musk walked onto the stage. The summer heat pressed down on Austin, Texas like a heavy blanket. It was Tuesday morning, August 15th, and the temperature had already climbed to 95 degrees. Outside the SpaceX headquarters, a massive building made of glass and steel, hundreds of reporters gathered in the parking lot. They wiped sweat from their faces and checked their cameras for the 100th time. Nobody knew why they were here. At 9:47 a.m., Elon Musk's assistant had sent out an urgent message to every major news network in America. Emergency press conference at 11:00 a.m. Mr. Musk will make an announcement that changes everything. That was all it said. No details, no hints. Just those mysterious words, changes everything. Inside the building's main conference room, 300 folding chairs filled every inch of space. Reporters from CNN, Fox News, BBC, Al Jazeera, and dozens of other networks claimed their seats. Cameras on tripods lined the back wall. Photographers crouched in front of the stage, their lenses pointed at the empty podium. In the third row, Professor Marcus Williams adjusted his glasses and opened his leather notebook. At 42 years old, Marcus had spent his entire adult life studying history. He taught at Howard University in Washington, D.C., one of America's most famous historically black colleges. His students loved him because he made ancient history feel alive and important. Marcus was tall and thin, with dark brown skin and short, graying hair at his temples. Today he wore his best navy blue suit, the one he saved for important occasions. His wife, Nicole, had ironed it for him that morning before he caught the 6 a.m. flight from D.C. to Austin. Why would Elon Musk invite you to a press conference? Nicole had asked while making coffee in their kitchen. You study ancient Rome and the Middle East. He builds rockets and electric cars. Marcus had shrugged. I have no idea, but his assistant said it was urgent. Something about my research. Now, sitting in this crowded room, Marcus felt his heart beating faster. Something big was about to happen. He could feel it. 3 seats to his left sat Father David O'Connor, a Catholic priest from Boston. Father O'Connor was 58 years old with pale white skin, bright blue eyes, and thick gray hair. He wore his traditional black priest shirt with the white collar. His large hands gripped a wooden rosary, and his lips moved silently in prayer. Father O'Connor had flown to Austin for one reason, to challenge whatever Elon Musk was about to say. 3 days ago, a rumor had spread through Catholic churches across America. People whispered that Elon Musk was going to attack Christianity. Father O'Connor had spent 30 years defending his faith. He wasn't about to stop now. The two men, Marcus and Father O'Connor, didn't know each other yet, but soon their lives would become connected in ways neither could imagine. At 10:58 a.m., the room's lights dimmed slightly. The crowd grew quiet. Everyone turned toward the side door. Elon Musk walked onto the stage. He looked exactly like he did in photos, tall and lean, wearing jeans and a black t-shirt with the SpaceX logo. His face showed no emotion as he walked to the podium. Behind him, a massive screen glowed blue. Elon gripped the edges of the podium and stared at the crowd. For 10 long seconds, he said nothing. The only sound was the clicking of camera shutters. Finally, he spoke.
Thank you for coming on short notice. His voice was calm but serious.
I'm going to tell you something that will make many of you uncomfortable. Some of you will be angry. Some will call me a liar. But I'm going to say it anyway, because truth matters more than comfort. Marcus leaned forward in his seat. His pen hovered over his notebook. Father O'Connor's hands tightened around his rosary. For the past 2 years, Elon continued, my team has been working on a secret project. We've used Starlink satellites, ground-penetrating radar, and artificial intelligence to study archaeological sites across the Middle East. We've examined places in Israel, Palestine, Egypt, Jordan, and Ethiopia. On the screen behind him, a map appeared. It showed the Mediterranean Sea, the Red Sea, and the lands around them. Red dots marked locations across the region. We've been searching for the truth about history, Elon said. Real history. Not the stories we've been told, but what actually happened 2,000 years ago. A reporter in the front row raised her hand. Mr. Musk, what does this have to do with SpaceX or Tesla? Elon looked directly at her. Nothing. And everything. At SpaceX, we explore the future. But to understand the future, we need to understand the past. And our past has been edited. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. What do you mean, edited? Another reporter called out. Elon pressed a button on the podium. The screen changed. Now it showed paintings of Jesus Christ, the traditional images everyone had seen in churches and books. Jesus with pale white skin, long brown hair, and light-colored eyes. These paintings, Elon said, pointing at the screen, were created by European artists between 1300 and that's more than 1300 years after Jesus died. The artists painted Jesus to look like themselves, like Europeans. But Jesus wasn't European. He was born in Bethlehem, which is in modern-day Palestine. He grew up in Nazareth. He lived his entire life in the Middle East. Marcus's heart raced. He knew exactly where this was going. He'd been studying this topic for years. Father O'Connor's face turned red. His hands shook. So, what did Jesus actually look like? Elon asked the question that hung in everyone's mind. My team has spent 2 years trying to answer that question using science, archaeology, and historical evidence. He paused. The silence felt heavy. The evidence shows that Jesus Christ had dark skin. Very likely, he looked African. In simple terms, Jesus was black. The room exploded. Reporters jumped to their feet, shouting questions. Cameras flashed like lightning. Someone dropped their phone, and it clattered loudly on the floor. 2 security guards rushed forward, creating a barrier between Elon and the surging crowd. That's a lie. Father O'Connor shouted, his Irish accent thick with emotion. He stood up, his face now bright red. Jesus was Jewish. He was from the Middle East, just spreading false information. Other people yelled their own reactions. Some supported Elon. Others called him crazy. The noise became deafening. Marcus sat frozen in his chair. His grandmother's face flashed in his mind. Ruth Williams had died 2 years ago at age 86. She had grown up in Atlanta, Georgia during the 1940s and 50s, when segregation ruled the South. She'd attended Ebenezer Baptist Church, the same church where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. preached about equality and justice. Marcus remembered sitting in his grandmother's kitchen when he was 10 years old. She'd been cooking collard greens and cornbread, and he'd asked her about a picture he'd seen at church, Jesus with blonde hair and blue eyes. Grandma, why doesn't Jesus look like us? Young Marcus had asked. Ruth had stopped stirring her pot. She'd turned to him with sad, wise eyes. Baby, she'd said softly, Jesus probably did look like us, but powerful people changed his picture to make themselves feel more important. They wanted everyone to think God looked like them, but God loves all his children equally, no matter what color they are. She touched his cheek. Remember this, Marcus? The truth always finds its way to the light. Always. It might take time, but truth is patient. Now, sitting in this chaotic press conference, Marcus felt tears in his eyes. His grandmother had been right. Elon raised his hand, calling for quiet. The security guards helped to restore order. Slowly, people sat back down, though everyone kept talking and whispering. I know this upsets people, Elon said. I expected that, but let me show you the evidence before you make up your minds. He pressed another button. The screen changed again. This time it showed a satellite image of the Earth, zooming in on the Middle East, then closer on a specific area near the Sea of Galilee in northern Israel. 2 years ago, one of our Starlink satellites detected unusual structures underground in this region. We sent a research team to investigate. What they found was a tomb, a burial chamber sealed for approximately 2,000 years. The image changed to show the inside of an ancient cave. Stone walls covered in dust, pottery pieces scattered on the ground, and on the walls, paintings. The paintings showed people, lots of people, and women and children, and every single person in these paintings had dark skin, broad noses, and tightly curled hair. These paintings, Elon explained, date back to around 50 to 100 AD, within living memory of Jesus' death. The people who painted these images would have known what people in that region actually looked like. And this is how they painted them. Marcus wrote frantically in his notebook. His hands shook with excitement. This was exactly what his research had suggested, but he'd never had this kind of physical evidence. "You also found something else," Elon said. His voice dropped lower, more serious. "We found DNA evidence." The crowd went silent again. "DNA?" a reporter whispered loudly. "Yes, we collected dust samples from the tomb. These samples contained DNA from the people who were buried there and the people who visited the tomb during the first century. When we analyzed this DNA, we found markers that indicate a mixture of ancestries, Middle Eastern, yes, but also significant Northeast African heritage. The population of ancient Palestine was much more diverse and much darker than most people realize." Elon turned to face the audience directly. "Let me be clear, I cannot prove that any specific DNA sample belonged to Jesus himself. That would be impossible. But I can prove that the people living in that region at that time, including Jesus, would have looked very different from the European paintings we've seen for centuries." Father O'Connor stood up again. This time his voice was shaky but determined. "Mr. Musk, even if people in that region had darker skin, that doesn't mean—" "Father," Elon interrupted gently but firmly, "I'm not finished." He walked to the edge of the stage. From beneath the podium, he pulled out a metal case. It was about the size of a large briefcase made of silver metal with complex locks on the front. Every camera in the room focused on that case. "Inside this case," Elon said slowly, "is evidence that will change how we understand Christianity forever. But before I open it, I need you to understand why this matters." He looked directly at Marcus. "Professor Williams, would you please stand up?" Marcus's heart nearly stopped. How did Elon know his name? They'd never met. Slowly, Marcus said. Every eye in the room turned to him. "Professor Williams teaches history at Howard University," Elon said. "Last year, he published a research paper titled The Forgotten Colors of Ancient Palestine, Archaeological Evidence of African Migration." His paper argued that ancient Palestine had a much larger African population than most historians admit. He was right. My team's discoveries confirm his research. Marcus felt dizzy. He'd published that paper in a small academic journal. Maybe 300 people had read it. How did Elon Musk even know it existed? "Professor Williams," Elon continued, "your paper asks an important question. Why are we so afraid to admit that ancient Middle Eastern people might have looked African? You wrote, and I quote, 'Our unwillingness to acknowledge African presence in ancient Palestine reveals more about modern racism than ancient history.' Do you still believe that?" Marcus's mouth felt dry. Every person in the room stared at him. The camera zoomed in on his face. Finally, he found his voice. "Yes," Marcus said clearly. "I believe that truth matters more than comfort. And I believe we've hidden certain truths about history because they make powerful people uncomfortable." Elon nodded. "Exactly. That's why I invited you here. And if you're, I need historians like you to help people understand what we found." He turned back to the audience. "I also invited Father O'Connor from Boston. Father, I know you flew here to challenge me. I respect that. I want religious leaders to examine our evidence carefully, question everything. That's what good science requires." Father O'Connor looked surprised. He sat down slowly, his anger replaced by confusion. "And there's one more person I want to introduce," Elon said. "Dr. Miro Okonkwo, please come out here." The side door opened. A woman walked on the stage. Dr. Amara Okonkwo was 35 years old, with beautiful dark brown skin and her hair braided in intricate patterns. She wore a white lab coat over professional clothes and carried a tablet computer. When she smiled, her whole face lit up with intelligence and kindness. "Dr. Okonkwo is from Nigeria," Elon explained. "She earned her PhD in archaeology from Cambridge University in England. She's one of the world's leading experts on ancient African civilizations. For the past year, she's been leading my research team in the Middle East." Amara waved shyly at the crowd. "Hello, everyone. I know this is shocking news, but I promise you everything Mr. Musk has told you is supported by solid evidence. We've been very careful, very thorough." Her accent carried the musical quality of Nigerian English. "I grew up in Lagos, going to church every Sunday. I learned about Jesus as a child, just like many of you, uh, like many African Christians. I sometimes wondered why Jesus looked so different from me in all the pictures. Now, as a scientist, I can tell you, he probably didn't look that different at all." The room remained silent. People seemed stunned, trying to process everything. Elon placed his hand on the metal case. Inside this case is a piece of cloth. We found it in the same tomb I showed you earlier. This cloth has been carbon dated by 3 separate laboratories. All 3 confirmed it comes from between 30 and 70 AD, exactly when Jesus lived.
He paused for effect.
The cloth contains the faint imprint of a face. Using ultraviolet light and artificial intelligence enhancement, we've been able to reconstruct what that face looked like. Marcus couldn't breathe, neither could anyone else in the room. But before I show you, Elon said, I want to explain why we waited 2 years to announce this. We wanted to be absolutely certain. We consulted with historians, archaeologists, religious scholars, and DNA experts from around the world. Some of these experts are Jewish, some are Muslim, some are Christian, both black and white. Some have no religion at all. We wanted every perspective. And what did they say? A reporter called out. They all agreed, Amara answered, stepping forward. The evidence is strong. The science is solid. People in first century Palestine had darker skin than European paintings suggest. Much darker. Elon's finger hovered over the locks on the metal case. This case contains more than just cloth. It contains DNA samples, pottery fragments, and detailed photographs of the tomb paintings. Everything is available for independent testing. We're not asking you to just trust us. We're giving you the evidence. You can verify it yourselves. Father O'Connor stood up once more, but this time his voice was soft, almost broken. Mr. Musk, if you open that case, if you show what's inside, everything changes. Everything. I know, Elon said quietly. That's exactly why I have to open it. His fingers touched the first lock. The room held its breath. Marcus thought about his grandmother Ruth one more time. He could almost hear her voice. The truth always finds its way to the light, baby. Always. The lock clicked open. Then the second lock. Elon's hand reached for the lid of the case. Before I open this, he said, looking up at the cameras, I want to say one more thing. To everyone watching around the world, I'm not trying to destroy your faith. I'm not trying to attack Christianity. I'm simply showing you the truth. What you do with that truth, how you respond to it, that's up to you. But you deserve to know. Everyone deserves to know. The room was so quiet that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Elon lifted the lid. Inside the case, surrounded by protective foam, lay a piece of ancient cloth. It was brown with age, fragile looking, carefully preserved behind clear protective glass. Even from his seat, Marcus could see faint markings on the cloth, the ghost of an image, barely visible. This cloth, Amara said, her voice full of emotion, shows us the face of someone from ancient Palestine, someone who lived during Jesus' time. We cannot say with absolute certainty that this is Jesus himself, but we can say that this is what people looked like in that place at that time. Elon pressed a button on his podium. On the screen behind him appeared an enhanced image, the reconstruction his team had created using artificial intelligence and ultraviolet light. The face on the screen had dark brown skin, a broad nose, and full lips, tightly curled hair. The facial structure showed features common in Northeast Africa, Ethiopia, Sudan, Egypt. This was a black face. This, Elon said quietly, is what Jesus probably looked like. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The world seemed to stop spinning. Then chaos erupted again, but this time it was different. This time people weren't just surprised or angry. They were stunned, transformed, changed. Marcus felt tears running down his face. He didn't try to stop them. Father O'Connor sank into his chair, his head in his hands. Was he praying? Crying? Both? Reporters shouted 1,000 questions at once. Cameras flashed so frequently that the room seemed to strobe with light. Elon raised his hands. That's all I have to say today. The full research report will be published tomorrow. All the evidence, every piece of data, every photograph, every DNA analysis will be available to the public. Thank you. He picked up the metal case and walked off the stage. Amar followed him, glancing back at the shocked crowd. Security guards blocked reporters from following. Marcus sat frozen in his seat as people rushed past him toward the exits. Everyone wanted to be the first to report this story. The biggest religious news in centuries. Maybe the biggest religious news ever. But Marcus didn't move. He couldn't. His mind was spinning with a million thoughts. His grandmother had been right. The truth had found its way to the light. But what would the world do with this truth? How would people react? How would churches respond? Would this bring people together or tear them apart? Marcus didn't know. But he knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. His phone buzzed. A text message from his wife, Nicole. I'm watching the news. Marcus, call me. Are you okay? He texted back. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Father O'Connor was still sitting 3 seats away, his rosary clutched in his hands. Marcus noticed the priest's shoulders shaking. He was definitely crying. Marcus stood up and walked over. He sat down next to the priest and put a gentle hand on his shoulder. Father, Marcus said softly, "Are you all right?" Father O'Connor looked up. His blue eyes were red and wet with tears. "I've spent 30 years," he whispered, "telling people what Jesus looked like, describing him in sermons. And I was wrong. I was completely wrong." Marcus squeezed his shoulder. "You weren't wrong about his message, though. You weren't wrong about his love. That's what really matters." Father O'Connor nodded slowly. "But I used his image, the wrong image, to make people feel like God was on their side. Don't you see? I made God look like me, and that made other people feel like God wasn't for them." "Then now you know," Marcus said gently. "Now you can do better. That's all any of us can do." The two men sat together in the emptying conference room, a black history professor and a white Catholic priest, both trying to understand what this moment meant. Outside, the Texas sun blazed down in Austin. News vans raced away from SpaceX headquarters, rushing to broadcast the story to the world. In living rooms across America, families gathered around their televisions. In churches, mosques, and synagogues, religious leaders received urgent phone calls. In universities, professors canceled classes to discuss this breaking news. And on social media, millions of people began sharing their reactions: shock, joy, anger, and confusion, celebration, denial. The announcement had been made. The evidence had been shown. Now the real work would begin, helping the world understand what this meant. Marcus stood up slowly. He needed to call his wife. He needed to book a flight home. He needed to prepare for what came next. But as he walked toward the exit, he stopped and looked back at the empty stage where Elon Musk had stood just minutes ago. The truth had been revealed. But what was in that metal case that it hadn't been shown yet? What other evidence did Elon have? And why did he specifically invite Marcus to be here? These questions would have to wait. Right now, Marcus needed to step outside and face a world that had just been turned upside down. He pushed open the door and walked into the Texas heat. The story had only just begun. Marcus stepped out of the SpaceX building into the brutal Texas heat. The sun hit his face like a physical force, making him squint. His phone was already buzzing with messages. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Text messages, emails, missed calls. Everyone wanted to know what he just witnessed. He found a bench in the shade of a large oak tree and sat down. His legs felt weak, like they might give out if he kept standing. Taking a deep breath, he called his wife. Nicole answered before the first ring finished. "Marcus? Oh my God, Marcus, are you okay? I'm watching CNN and they're showing your face. You're on television?" "I know, baby. I know." Marcus rubbed his temples. A headache was already forming behind his eyes. "Is it true?" Nicole's voice trembled. Did Elon Musk really prove that Jesus was black? Marcus thought carefully before answering. His wife deserved honesty, not hype. He presented very strong evidence that people in ancient Palestine had much darker skin than we've been taught. Whether that specific cloth belonged to Jesus, we can't be completely certain. But the science looks solid, Nicole. Really solid. He could hear her crying softly on the other end. Nicole had grown up in a Black Baptist church in Virginia. She had told Marcus stories about being a little girl and wondering why Jesus in the Sunday school pictures didn't look like her mama or her daddy. "Your grandmother was right," Nicole whispered. "Ruth was right all along." "Yeah," Marcus felt his own tears returning. "She was." They talked for a few more minutes. Nicole told them that their phone at home hadn't stopped ringing. Their pastor had called. Marcus's colleagues from Howard University had called. Even his cousin from Chicago, who hadn't spoken to him in 3 years, had called. "Everyone wants to talk to you," Nicole said. "What should I tell them?" "Tell them I'll make a statement when I get home. I need time to think first." After hanging up with Nicole, Marcus looked at his phone. 147 new messages. He scrolled through them quickly. "From Dr. Patricia Henderson, the Dean of Howard University. Marcus, we need to talk immediately. The Board of Trustees is calling an emergency meeting." From his best friend James, who taught mathematics. "Bro, you're trending on Twitter. #1 worldwide. Worldwide." From his mother in Atlanta. "Baby, I'm so proud of you. Your grandmother is smiling down from heaven right now." And then one message that made Marcus's heart skip. "Professor Williams, this is Sarah Chen from Tesla. Mr. Musk would like to meet with you privately this evening. He has more to show you. Can you stay in Austin one more day?" Marcus stared at that message. More to show him? What more could there possibly be? His flight back to DC was scheduled for 6:00 p.m., 3 hours from now. He could make it if he left for the airport right now, go home, see his wife, hide from the media storm that was surely coming, or he could stay. He could find out what else Elon Musk had discovered. Marcus thought about his grandmother Ruth again. What would she do? He knew the answer immediately. Ruth Williams had never run from the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it made people. She'd marched with Dr. King in the 1960s, even when white police officers hit her with clubs. She'd integrated a whites-only restaurant in downtown Atlanta, even when people spit on her and called her terrible names. The truth always finds its way to the light, she used to say. And when it does, you better be brave enough to stand in that light, even if it burns. Marcus typed a response to Sarah Chen. I can stay. What time and where? The answer came back in 30 seconds, so-and-so p.m., same building, come to the private entrance on the west side. Someone will meet you there. Marcus booked a hotel room using his phone, then called the airline to change his flight to tomorrow morning. The customer service representative recognized his voice from the news. Is this Professor Williams from the press conference? Yes, ma'am. I just want to say thank you. Her grandmother is going to be so happy when I tell her about this. She's 83 years old, and she's been saying for years that Jesus was black. Now she has proof. Marcus felt warmth spread through his chest. Tell your grandmother that she was right to trust her instincts. After handling the logistics, Marcus knew he couldn't just sit on this bench for the next few hours. He needed to eat something, clear his head, and prepare for whatever Elon was going to show him tonight. He called an Uber and headed to downtown Austin. The driver, a young Hispanic man named Carlos, recognized him immediately. You're the history professor from the news. Carlos turned around in his seat, grinning widely. Man, that was crazy. My mom called me crying. She's from Mexico, you know? She always said that Jesus probably looked more like us, brown skin, dark hair. She said the conquistadors changed Jesus' image to make indigenous people feel bad about themselves. Marcus settled into the back seat. Your mom sounds like a very wise woman. She is. She cleans houses for rich white families in West Austin. They have all these paintings of blonde Jesus in their homes. Well, my mom says she prays to a different Jesus, the real one. They drove through Austin streets. Carlos pointed out the Texas State Capitol building, the University of Texas campus, and several famous barbecue restaurants. But mostly, he wanted to talk about the press conference.
Do you think the Catholic Church will accept this?
Carlos asked. My mom goes to Mass every Sunday. What the priests say is not true. I don't know, Marcus admitted, but the evidence is real. It exists. People can choose to ignore it, but that doesn't make it go away. Carlos dropped Marcus off at a small Ethiopian restaurant called Taste of Addis. My girlfriend brought me here once, Carlos said. The food is amazing. And hey, if Jesus was from that part of the world, maybe this is the kind of food he ate. Marcus laughed, his first genuine laugh since the press conference. Maybe you're right. Inside the restaurant, the smell of spices filled the air. Berry, turmeric, cardamom. The walls were decorated with beautiful Ethiopian art paintings of Orthodox Christian churches, ancient manuscripts with gay script, and yes, images of black saints and black representations of Jesus. A woman in traditional Ethiopian dress approached him. She was perhaps 60 years old, with kind eyes and graying hair wrapped in a colorful headscarf. Welcome, she said warmly. Then she paused, looking at him more closely. Wait, are you from the television? The professor? Marcus nodded, suddenly worried. Would she be angry? Some people loved what Elon had revealed. Others were furious. The woman's face broke into the widest smile Marcus had ever seen. She called out in Amharic, the Ethiopian language, and suddenly 3 more people rushed out from the kitchen. An older man, a younger woman, and a teenage boy. This is him, the first woman said, switching to English. The professor from the news. He was at Elon Musk conference. The older man grabbed Marcus's hand and shook it vigorously. Brother, thank you. Thank you for standing with the truth. The Ethiopians have known for thousands of years. We have known. Our churches have always shown Jesus with dark skin. We never changed him to look European like the others did. The younger woman nodded enthusiastically. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is one of the oldest Christian churches in the world. We've been Christian since the 1st century AD. Our Bible, the Gerime Gospels, is one of the oldest illustrated Christian manuscripts. It's over 1,500 years old, and every illustration shows Jesus and the saints with African features. Marcus felt overwhelmed by their warmth and excitement. They seated him at the best table in the restaurant and brought him food without even asking what he wanted. Injera, the spongy Ethiopian flatbread, Dora what, spicy chicken stew, kitfo, seasoned raw beef, vegetable dishes with lentils and collard greens. Eat, the older woman insisted. You need strength for the work ahead. God has chosen you for something important. As Marcus ate, and the food was indeed incredible, the family told him about Ethiopian Christianity. They explained how Ethiopia was mentioned in the Bible multiple times. How an Ethiopian eunuch was one of the first Gentiles to convert to Christianity, as told in the book of Acts. How the Queen of Sheba, who visited King Solomon, came from Ethiopia. For centuries, the older man said, his voice getting passionate, European Christians treated us like we didn't exist. They wrote history books that ignored African Christianity completely. They made it seem like Christianity was a white religion that white missionaries brought to Africa. But we were Christians before most of Europe. We were Christians when Europeans were still pagans. The teenage boy who had been quiet until now spoke up. That's why what Mr. Musk did today matters so much. It's not just about Jesus' skin color. It's about who gets to tell history, who gets to decide what's true and what's not. Marcus looked at this young man with respect. That's exactly right. How old are you? 16. I'm a junior at Austin High School. You're very wise for 16. The boy smiled shyly. My grandfather teaches me. He says that people who control the past control the present. If they can make you forget your history, they can make you forget your worth. Those words hit Marcus hard. That's exactly what had happened. By making Jesus look European, powerful people had convinced millions of non-white people that they were less worthy, less loved by God, less important in the world. Marcus finished his meal and tried to pay, but the family refused his money. No, the older woman said firmly, this meal is a gift. You're doing important work. This is our contribution. Marcus's eyes filled with tears again. Thank you. Thank you so much. As he stood to leave, the teenage boy handed him a small wooden cross. This is from Ethiopia. My grandfather brought it when our family immigrated here 20 years ago. He wants you to have it. I can't take this, Marcus protested. It's a family treasure. That's exactly why you should have it, the grandfather said. You're family now. You're fighting for our story. For all our stories. Marcus accepted the cross with trembling hands. It was made of dark wood, simple but beautiful, worn smooth by years of prayers. He left the restaurant feeling strengthened, not just by the food, but by the connection to these people and their history. His phone showed it was 5:30 p.m. He had 90 minutes before his meeting with Elon. Marcus walked through downtown Austin, trying to organize his thoughts. Would Elon show him? Why had he been specifically chosen for this? His phone rang. It was Father O'Connor, the Irish priest from the press conference. Marcus answered cautiously. Father O'Connor, Professor Williams. The priest's voice sounded tired, strained. I hope I'm not bothering you. I got your number from, well, it doesn't matter how. I wanted to apologize for my behavior at the press conference. I was rude, aggressive. You're shocked, Fox said gently. We all were. I've been walking around Austin for hours, thinking and praying. I keep asking myself, why am I so upset? Is it because I think the evidence is wrong? Or is it because I'm afraid the evidence is right? Marcus found another bench and sat down. And what did you decide? Father O'Connor was quiet for a long moment. I think I'm afraid it's right. I'm afraid because if Jesus looked different than I've been teaching, then what else have I been wrong about? How many other things did I accept without questioning? Father, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Have you ever had a black person in your congregation, in your church in Boston? Silence. Then no, not really. Boston is very segregated. The neighborhoods are divided. My church is in an Irish Catholic area. It's almost entirely white. But you've been preaching about Jesus to white people using images of a white Jesus in an all-white church. Yes. Father O'Connor's voice was barely a whisper. Do you think that might be part of why this is so hard for you? Because accepting a black Jesus means accepting that your church has been incomplete, that you've been serving only one small part of God's family, or silence. Marcus could hear the priest breathing heavily on the other end. Professor Williams, are you meeting with Elon Musk again? Marcus was surprised. How did you know? I received a message too. He wants to meet with me tonight. Show me more evidence. I'm terrified, to be honest. I'm terrified of what else I might learn. But you're going to go anyway. Yes, I have to. If I run from this, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering. And I'll know that I chose comfort over truth. Marcus smiled. Then I'll see you there, Father. We'll face the truth together. They hung up. Marcus checked his watch, 6:45 p.m. Time to go. He walked the 15 minutes back to SpaceX headquarters, to the west entrance. Sarah Chen had said, when he arrived, he saw a small door with a secured keypad. As he approached, the door opened. A young Asian woman stepped out. She wore professional business clothes and had a warm smile. Professor Williams, I'm Sarah Chen. Thank you for staying. They shook hands. Sarah led him to a quiet hallway, very different from the chaos of the main conference room earlier. This part of the building felt peaceful, almost sacred. Mr. Musk is in the research library, Sarah explained. He wanted a quiet place to show you what he found. Dr. Okonkwo is already there, and Father O'Connor should arrive any minute. Why us? Marcus asked. Why did Elon choose the three of us specifically? Sarah smiled mysteriously. He'll explain. But basically, he needs a historian who understands this topic academically. He needs a religious leader who can help other Christians process this information. And he needs Dr. Okonkwo because, well, you'll see. She opened another door. Marcus stepped into a beautiful library, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes about history, science, religion, and archaeology. In the center of the room stood a large wooden table. Elon Musk sat at the table, studying something on a tablet. When he saw Marcus, he stood and extended his hand. Professor Williams, thank you for staying. I know this has been an overwhelming day. Marcus shook his hand. Mr. Musk, I have about 1,000,000 questions. I know, and I'm going to answer all of them. Elon gestured to a chair. Please, sit.
Dr. Amara Okonkwo was there too.
Her beautiful braids now pulled back into a ponytail. She smiled at Marcus. Professor, I've read your work. Your paper on African migration to ancient Palestine was brilliant. That's actually what gave us the idea to look more carefully at the region's population genetics. My paper? Marcus was shocked. That was published in a tiny journal. I thought nobody read it. I read it, Amar said, and I sent it to Mr. Musk. I told him, this professor is asking the right questions. If we're going to research this topic, we need him involved. Before Marcus could respond, the door opened again. Father O'Connor entered, looking nervous and exhausted. Elon greeted him warmly, without any judgment. Father O'Connor, thank you for coming. I know this is difficult for you. The priest nodded. Mr. Musk, I came here this morning ready to fight you, to prove you wrong. But now I just want to understand. That's all I ask, Elon said, from all of you. Just be willing to look at the evidence with open minds. The four of them, Marcus, Father O'Connor, Amar, and Elon, sat around the table. Sarah Chen brought water and coffee, then quietly left, closing the door behind her. Elon placed a metal case on the table, same case from the press conference. This morning, he began, I showed the world one piece of evidence, the cloth with the facial imprint. But that's just the beginning. What I'm about to show you, 3, is much more significant, and I need your help deciding how to present it to the world. He opened the case. Inside, along with the preserved cloth, were several other items Marcus hadn't seen before. Pottery fragments, small pieces of ancient jewelry, several vials of what looked like dust or soil, and a USB drive. Elon picked up the USB drive. This contains something extraordinary, something that will either heal the wounds of racial division in Christianity or create even more chaos. I'm not sure which. Marcus leaned forward. What is it? Elon plugged the USB drive into his tablet. An image appeared on the screen. It was a painting. An ancient painting, clearly thousands of years old. The colors were faded, but still visible. And it showed something that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. This image, Elon said quietly, was found in the same tomb as the cloth. It's dated to approximately 5070 AD, and it shows something that the early Christians saw, but that later generations tried to hide. The painting showed a group of people gathered together, men and women of all different ages, and their skin colors varied, some dark brown, some lighter brown, some almost black. They were sharing a meal together, breaking bread. But what made Marcus's eyes fill with tears was the figure at the center of the painting, a man with dark brown skin, curly hair, and kind eyes. His hands were raised, blessing the bread. Father O'Connor gasped. Is that? We believe, Amar said softly, that this is one of the earliest known depictions of the Last Supper. Painted by someone who either witnessed it or heard first-hand accounts from people who were there. And as you can see, Jesus and his disciples looked very different from later European paintings. Marcus couldn't speak. He just stared at the image, his heart pounding. This changed everything. Everything. Elon looked at the three of them seriously. So here's my question. What do we do with this? The silence in the library felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Marcus stared at the ancient painting on Elon's tablet, his mind racing. Father O'Connor had gone pale, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Dr. Amara Okonkwo watched both men carefully. Understanding the weight of this moment, Before you answer my question, Elon said, let me show you everything. You need to see the complete picture. He swiped to the next image on his tablet. This one showed a map of the underground excavation site near the Sea of Galilee in northern Israel. Red lines marked where ground-penetrating radar had detected the hidden tomb. 2 years ago, Elon began, SpaceX launched a new generation of Starlink satellites. These satellites have advanced imaging technology, much more powerful than previous versions. We designed them to map terrain for potential Mars colonies, but I realized we could use the same technology to study Earth's archaeological sites. He zoomed in on the map. I've always been fascinated by history, not just space exploration and in the future, but understanding where we came from. So I hired a team of archaeologists and gave them access to our satellite data. Dr. Okonkwo led the team.
Amara nodded and took over the explanation.
We started by mapping known archaeological sites in Israel and Palestine, but the satellite technology showed us something unexpected. Structures underground that nobody knew existed. Here, look at this. She pulled up another image. It showed layers of earth like a cross-section of the ground. Deep beneath the surface, geometric shapes appeared in bright colors. These shapes indicated human-made structures, Amar explained. Chambers carved into rock. We estimated they were about 2,000 years old, based on the geological layers above them. Marcus leaned closer. As a history professor, he'd seen archaeological reports before, but never anything this detailed. How deep underground? About 40 feet, Amara said. The entrance had collapsed centuries ago and was buried. Without the satellite technology, no one would have ever found it. Father O'Connor finally spoke, his Irish accent thick with emotion. And you're saying this tomb is from the time of Jesus? We're saying it's from the 1st century AD. Elon corrected carefully, between 30 and 100 AD, according to multiple dating methods, whether it's directly connected to Jesus himself. We cannot prove with absolute certainty that the location and time period match perfectly. Elon stood and walked to one of the bookshelves. We pulled out a thick volume, a history of the Roman Empire, and brought it back to the table. Here's what we know about ancient Palestine during Jesus' lifetime, he said, flipping through pages. As part of the Roman Empire, Judea, Galilee, Samaria, these regions were crossroads of the ancient world. Trade routes connected Africa, Asia, and Europe. People traveled constantly. Marcus felt his historian's the brain engaging fully now, pushing past the emotion. The Via Maris, he said, the ancient coastal highway. It ran from Egypt through Palestine to Syria and beyond. Merchants, soldiers, pilgrims, thousands of people used that road every year. Exactly, Amara said, her eyes lighting up. And those travelers weren't all the same ethnicity. Archaeological evidence shows that ancient Palestine had one of the most diverse populations in the Mediterranean world. People from Egypt, Ethiopia, Arabia, Greece, Rome, Persia, they all mixed together. She pulled up more images on the tablets. These showed DNA analysis charts, genetic markers, population distribution maps. The scientific data was complex, but the conclusion was clear. We collected soil samples from the tomb, Amar explained. Soil absorbs DNA from human remains, from skin cells, from the people who visited these places. Using advanced genetic analysis, we can identify what populations were present. And Professor Williams, the DNA markers we found match your research exactly. Marcus remembered his paper, the one that almost no one had read. It argued that significant African populations lived in ancient Palestine based on historical records and limited archaeological evidence. Now, here was genetic proof. The DNA shows a mixture, Amara continued. Yes, there are markers common to ancient Middle Eastern populations, but there are also significant markers from Northeast Africa, the region we now call Ethiopia, Eritrea, Sudan, and southern Egypt. This mixture was common in 1st century Palestine. Very common. Father O'Connor rubbed his face with both hands. But Jesus was Jewish. The Bible is very clear about that. He was descended from King David, from the tribe of Judah. How does that fit with what you're saying? Marcus answered before anyone else could. Father, being Jewish is about religion and culture, not just genetics. The Jewish people themselves have always been diverse. Moses married a woman from Cush, which was in Africa. The Bible mentions Ethiopian Jews. Queen Esther in the Bible might have been Persian. Judaism has always included people of many different backgrounds. That's historically accurate, Amar confirmed. Modern DNA studies of Jewish populations show incredible diversity. There are Ethiopian Jews, Yemeni Jews, European Jews, Indian Jews, all practicing the same religion, but with different ethnic backgrounds. Ancient Judaism was no different. Elon returned to his tablet and pulled up another image. This one showed the interior of the tomb they'd discovered, stone walls carved carefully by ancient hands, and covering those walls were paintings, dozens of them. These paintings tell us what the local population looked like, Elon said. And remember, these were painted within decades of Jesus' death. The artists were painting people they'd actually seen. The painting showed scenes of daily life, people working in fields, families sharing meals, religious ceremonies. And in every single image, the people had dark skin, ranging from medium brown to very dark brown. Their facial features varied, but most had broad noses, full lips, and tightly curled hair. In this painting, Amara pointed to one image. You can see a wedding celebration. Notice the variety of skin tones. This wasn't a homogeneous population. And here, this painting shows what we believe is a religious gathering. See the man at the center with his hands raised in blessing? That's likely a rabbi, a religious teacher. Marcus studied the figure, dark skin, curly hair, a kind face. Could this be an image of Jesus or just another teacher from that time period? There was no way to know for certain. Now look at this, Elon said, swiping to a new image. This one took Marcus's breath away. It was the painting Elon had shown them earlier, the Last Supper scene, but now he could see it in much greater detail. 13 figures sat around a table. The central figure, clearly meant to be Jesus, had his hands over bread, breaking it. His face showed compassion and sadness, as if he knew something terrible was coming. But yeah, what struck Marcus most was the diversity in the painting. The disciples had different skin tones, different facial features. Some looked African, some Middle Eastern, some lighter skinned. They looked like a real group of people from a diverse region, not like the uniform European figures in later Renaissance paintings. This painting changed everything for me, Father O'Connor said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. The priest's eyes were wet with tears. I've seen hundreds of paintings of the Last Supper in museums, churches, books. Leonardo da Vinci's version hangs in my church in Boston, and they all show Jesus and the disciples looking like Italian men from the 1400s, white skin, European features, neat beards. He pointed at the ancient painting on the screen, but this was painted by someone who lived in that world, someone who knew what those people actually looked like, and they looked like this. Emma smiled gently at the priest. Father O'Connor, I want to show you something else. Come with me. She stood and walked to another section of the library. The others followed. Amara pulled out a large book from the shelf, A History of Early Christian Art. Look at these images, she said, opening the book to a marked page. These are from the catacombs of Rome, underground burial chambers where early Christians hid during persecution. The paintings date from 2000 to 400 AD, much earlier than most famous Christian art. Marcus looked at the images in the book. The paintings were simple, almost crude compared to later Renaissance art, but they showed similar diversity. Some figures had lighter skin, others darker. The faces showed various ethnic features. And here, Amara flipped to another page, are examples from Coptic Christian churches in Egypt. These paintings date from the 400s to 600s AD. Notice anything? Father Connor stared at the images. Many of the holy figures, saints, apostles, even Jesus in some paintings, had distinctly African features, dark skin, curly hair, broad noses. The Coptic Christians are some of the oldest continuous Christian communities in the world, Marcus explained. They've been in Egypt since the 1st century. They never painted Jesus as a white European because they never were white Europeans. They painted him to look like themselves, like Middle Eastern and African people. Elon added, same is true in Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has existed since the 300s AD. They have some of the oldest Christian manuscripts and artwork in the world. And in all of their ancient art, Jesus and the disciples look African. Father O'Connor sat down heavily in a nearby chair. So what you're telling me is that the white Jesus, the one I've known my whole life, is actually the unusual version. That for the first several centuries of Christianity, most people painted Jesus to look like local populations, which means he looked African or Middle Eastern.
Yes.
O'Mara said simply, the European version of Jesus only became dominant after Christianity spread to Europe and European Christians gained political and military power. They repainted Jesus to look like themselves, and then they used that image to colonize other parts of the world. Marcus walked back to the table where Elon's tablet lay. He stared again at the ancient Last Supper painting. Something about it felt different from all the other Christian art he'd ever seen. It felt real, not idealized or symbolic, but like an actual moment captured by someone who'd been there. Elon, Marcus said, you asked us what we should do with this evidence, but I need to ask you a question first. Why are you doing this? You're one of the richest men in the world. You run multiple companies. Why spend 2 years and millions of dollars researching the historical appearance of Jesus? What's your motivation? Elon was quiet for a long moment. He walked to the window and looked out at the Austin skyline, now glowing with evening lights. I'm not religious, he finally said. I don't go to church. I don't pray. But I do care about truth, and I care about people. When I started learning about how religion has been used to justify racism, slavery, and colonization, I realized that images matter, symbols matter. He turned back to face them. If people believe that God looks white, they subconsciously believe that white people are more godly, more worthy, more important. It's psychological, and it's been used to oppress billions of people for centuries. I thought, what if we could prove that Jesus didn't look white? Would that change anything? Would that help heal some of the damage? But you're taking a huge risk, Father O'Connor said. Millions of Christians will be angry at you. They'll say you're attacking their faith. I know, but some things are worth the risk. Amara pulled out her phone and showed them something. Look at this. Since this press conference this morning, I've received over 10,000 messages. Most of them are from Black people, brown people, Asian people, Christians who've always felt excluded from their own religion because Jesus was presented as white. They're thanking us, crying with joy, saying they finally feel like they belong. She scrolled through message after message. I'm a Black woman from Georgia. I stopped going to church because I felt like God didn't love people who looked like me. Now I want to go back. I'm from Mexico. My grandmother always said Jesus had brown skin like us, but the priest said she was wrong. Thank you for proving she was right. I'm adopted from Korea. Growing up in a white family, I never saw myself in Christianity. Now I do. Marcus felt overwhelmed. This was bigger than archaeology or history. This was about human dignity, about belonging, about healing centuries of pain. So I asked again, Elon said, what should we do with this evidence? We can publish everything immediately, all the data, all the images, all the DNA analysis, make it available to scientists and scholars worldwide. Or we can release it slowly, giving religious leaders time to process and prepare their congregations. What do you think? Father O'Connor spoke first. If you publish everything at once, it will create chaos. Churches will split, families will fight. People need time to adjust to this. But if we wait too long, Marcus countered, it looks like we're hiding something, like the evidence isn't strong enough. And people who oppose this will use that delay to spread doubt and misinformation. Amara nodded. I agree with Professor Williams. The evidence is solid. We have nothing to hide. We should publish everything and let people examine it for themselves. They debated for another hour. Finally, they reached a decision to publish the complete research findings in 1 week. That gave religious leaders 7 days to prepare, but not enough time for opposition to organize a strong counterattack. In the meantime, Elon would invite independent scientists to examine the evidence and verify the findings. There's one more thing, Elon said. He opened the metal case again and carefully removed the ancient cloth, the one with the faint facial imprint. This cloth needs to be properly preserved and displayed. I'm thinking of donating it to a museum. But which one? The Smithsonian, Marcus said immediately, in Washington, D.C., the National Museum of African American History and Culture. It belongs there. Elon smiled. I was thinking the same thing. As the meeting wrapped up, Sarah Chen knocked on the door. Mr. Musk, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation. Protesters have gathered outside the building, hundreds of them. Everyone rushed to the window. Sure enough, the parking lot below was filled with people holding signs and candles. Some signs read lies and respect Jesus, but other signs read truth matters and Black Jesus saves. The crowd wasn't fighting, at least not yet. They were divided into 2 groups, each chanting their own slogans. This is just the beginning, Father O'Connor said quietly. This controversy will grow. It will spread to every church, every city, every country where Christians live.
I know, Elon said. That's why I need all of you.
Marcus, I need you to help explain the historical context to the public. Amara, I need you to defend the scientific evidence. And Father O'Connor, I need you to help other Christians understand that this doesn't destroy their faith, it enriches it. The priest looked uncertain. I don't know if I can do that. I'm still struggling with this myself. That's exactly why you're perfect for the job, Marcus said, putting a hand on the priest's shoulder. People need to see someone who's honest about their doubts, but still searching for truth. Father O'Connor looked at Marcus, really looked at him. a black man and a white man, a history professor and a Catholic priest, brought together by an ancient painting and a controversial discovery. Okay, Father O'Connor finally said, I'll try. God help me, I'll try. They all shook hands, forming an unlikely team. As Marcus prepared to leave for his hotel, Elon stopped him. Professor Williams, your grandmother would be proud of you. Marcus was startled. How do you know about my grandmother? I did my research. Ruth Williams, civil rights activist, member of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. She marched with Dr. King. She spent her life fighting for truth and justice. That's why I chose you for this project. You inherited her courage. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes for what felt like the 100th time that day. Thank you, Mr. Musk. That means more than you know. Outside, the protesters continued their chants. The world was changing, whether everyone was ready or not, and Marcus Amara, Father O'Connor, and Elon stood at the center of that change. The truth had been revealed. Now came the hard part, helping people accept it. Marcus didn't sleep well that night. He lay in his hotel room, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying everything he'd seen, the ancient paintings, the DNA evidence, the face on the cloth. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that image of the Last Supper, 13 men gathered around a table, their dark faces illuminated by candlelight. At 3:47 a.m., he gave up trying to sleep. He turned on the lamp and opened his laptop. His email inbox had exploded, 1,047 unread messages. He scrolled through them, reading subject lines. You're destroying Christianity. Thank you for speaking truth. Howard University should fire you. My daughter finally feels seen in her faith. How much is Elon paying you to lie? God bless you, Professor Williams. The messages were split almost evenly between support and rage. Marcus felt the weight of that division settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just an academic debate anymore. This was personal for millions of people. His phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Amara Okonkwo. Can't sleep either. Meet me for breakfast. I know a good place. Marcus smiled and texted back, yes. Where? 20 minutes later, Marcus sat across from Amara in a small diner called Magnolia Cafe. The restaurant was busy, even at this early hour, filled with university students, truck drivers, and night shift workers grabbing food before heading home. Amara looked tired but determined. She'd changed out of her professional clothes from yesterday and now wore jeans and a University of Lagos t-shirt. Without her lab coat, she looked younger, more relaxed. How are you holding up? She asked, sipping her coffee. Honestly, I'm terrified, Marcus admitted. Yesterday morning, I was just a history professor, now in the middle of biggest religious controversy in decades, maybe centuries. Amara nodded sympathetically. I know exactly how you feel. When I first saw the evidence 2 years ago, I wanted to run away, hide, pretend I'd never seen it.
What made you stay?
She thought for a moment. My grandmother, she raised me in Lagos after my parents died. She was a devout Christian, attended church every single Sunday. But she also told me stories about how white missionaries came to Nigeria and taught Africans that they were inferior because they didn't look like Jesus in the paintings. Amara's eyes grew distant with memory. My grandmother would say, Amara, those missionaries brought us the word of God, and for that I'm grateful. But they also brought us lies about ourselves. They made us ashamed of our skin, our hair, our features. They taught us that to be holy was to be white. She died believing that Jesus probably looked like us, but she never had proof. I'm doing this for her. Marcus reached across the table and squeezed her hand. My grandmother said almost the same thing. Ruth Williams. She died 2 years ago. Then we're doing this for both of them, Amara said firmly. They ordered food, pancakes for Marcus, a vegetable omelet for Amara, and continued talking. Amara told him more about the archaeological excavation, the months spent carefully documenting every inch of the tomb, the painstaking process of extracting DNA from ancient soil samples. The hardest part, she said, wasn't the science. The science is solid. We've had 3 independent laboratories verify our DNA findings. We've had carbon dating done by experts in 4 different countries. 5 art historians have examined the paintings. Everyone agrees the evidence is legitimate. So, what was the hardest part? Knowing what this would do to people, knowing that we were about to challenge beliefs that millions of people have held their entire lives. That's a huge responsibility, Marcus. What if we're wrong? What if we cause all this pain and division for nothing? Marcus understood her fear. He'd felt the same thing. But what if we're right? What if hiding this truth causes even more pain? How many black children grow up feeling like they don't belong in Christianity because Jesus doesn't look like them? How many people of color are told directly or indirectly that they're less valuable because they don't look like the image of God in the paintings? I know. That's why I stayed. That's why I helped Elon with this project, even though I knew it would be controversial. The food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Amara's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, and her face brightened. It's Father O'Connor. He wants to meet with us today. Says he's been up all night researching early Christian history, and he found something important. 2 hours later, Marcus and Amara met Father O'Connor at the Austin Public Library, a beautiful modern building in downtown Austin. The priest looked exhausted. His eyes were red, his gray hair disheveled, his priest collar slightly crooked. But there was an energy about him, an excitement that hadn't been there yesterday. I've been reading, Father O'Connor said, leading them to a quiet study room. All night I've been reading books about early Christianity, about the spread of the church in Africa, about things I should have learned in seminary but somehow didn't. He spread several books across the table: histories of the Coptic Church in Egypt, studies of Ethiopian Christianity, archaeological reports from early Christian sites in North Africa. Look at this, Father O'Connor said, pointing to a passage in one book. The Coptic Orthodox Church in Egypt traces its founding to the Apostle Mark, who arrived in Alexandria around 42 AD, just 12 years after Jesus died. The church spread rapidly through Egypt and into Ethiopia, Sudan, and Libya. By 2000 AD, North Africa had more Christians than Europe. Marcus leaned forward, interested. He knew some of this history, but Father O'Connor's enthusiasm was infectious. And look at this, the priest continued, flipping to another book. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims that Christianity came to Ethiopia even earlier, possibly through the Ethiopian eunuch mentioned in the Bible's book of Acts. That was in the 30s AD, within years of Jesus' crucifixion. This is all historically accurate, Emera confirmed. African Christianity is not a recent development. It's ancient, original. In many ways, African Christians have a stronger historical connection to early Christianity than Europeans do. Father O'Connor nodded vigorously. That's exactly what I'm realizing. The Catholic Church in Rome, my church didn't really become dominant until the 300s AD, when Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. But by then, Christianity had already been established in Africa for 200 or 300 years. He pulled out another book, this one filled with photographs of ancient artwork. Look at these images from Coptic churches. Jesus with dark skin, Mary with African features, saints and apostles who look nothing like the European paintings I grew up with. Marcus examined the photos carefully. The artwork was beautiful, colorful, expressive, deeply spiritual, and yes, every figure depicted had dark skin and African or Middle Eastern features. Father, Marcus said gently, why do you think you never learned about this in seminary? Why isn't African Christianity taught alongside European Christianity in Catholic schools? Father O'Connor was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion, because we European Christians wrote the history books. We decided what was important and what wasn't. And we decided that African Christianity wasn't important. We erased it. Not completely, but enough that people like me could go through years of religious education and never really understand how Central Africa was to early Christianity. He looked at Marcus and Amara, his blue eyes filling with tears. I'm 68 years old. I've been a priest for 30 years, and I'm just now learning the full story of my own religion. That's shameful. Amara spoke softly. Father O'Connor, you're learning now. That's what matters. And you can help other people learn too. That's why I called you both, Father O'Connor said, his voice growing stronger. We need to travel to these places, to Egypt, to Ethiopia, to Israel. We need to see the evidence with our own eyes and document it. Let me call Elon. Father O'Connor pulled out his phone and dialed. After a brief conversation, he hung up and smiled. Elon says his private jet is available. We can leave tomorrow morning. He's coming with us. Marcus felt his heart race. Tomorrow, to Israel and Egypt and Ethiopia, Amar added, grinning. I've been wanting to visit the rock-hewn churches of Ladabela for years. They're some of the most amazing Christian structures in the world, carved directly into solid rock in the 1100s. Marcus thought about his wife, Nicole, waiting for him in Washington, D.C. He thought about his classes at Howard University, his responsibilities as a professor, but he also thought about his grandmother, Ruth, who had spent her life fighting for truth, even when it was difficult. Okay, he said. Let's go. Let's see the evidence for ourselves. The next morning, Marcus found himself on a private jet flying east across the Atlantic Ocean. The plane was luxurious, leather seats, a bedroom in the back, a full kitchen. Elon Musk sat near the front, working on his laptop. Amura reviewed research notes. Father O'Connor read his Bible, occasionally making notes in the margins. Marcus stared out the window at the clouds below, thinking about the journey ahead. They would visit some of the oldest Christian sites in the world. They would see artwork and manuscripts that most people didn't even know existed. And they would gather evidence, solid, undeniable evidence that would help people understand the truth about early Christianity. 8 hours later, the plane landed in Tel Aviv, Israel, and the moment Marcus stepped off the plane, he felt the weight of history pressing down on him. This was the Holy Land, the place where Jesus had lived, preached, and died, the birthplace of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. A woman waited for them on the tarmac. She was in her mid-40s with olive skin, dark hair pulled into a bun, and intelligent brown eyes behind stylish glasses. She wore practical khaki pants and a linen shirt, suitable for the Middle Eastern heat. Shalom, she said warmly, shaking each person's hand. I'm Rabbi Sarah Goldstein. Welcome to Israel. Elon had arranged for Rabbi Goldstein to be their guide. She was a respected scholar of ancient Hebrew texts and archaeology, and she'd agreed to show them sites that most tourists never saw. They drove from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in a comfortable van. Rabbi Goldstein pointed out landmarks along the way, ancient ruins, modern cities, the hills where biblical events had taken place. I must tell you, Rabbi Goldstein said as they drove, your press conference caused quite a stir here in Israel. Some rabbis are angry, saying you're disrespecting Jewish heritage. But others, like me, are intrigued. We Jews don't focus as much on what people looked like. We care more about ideas, laws, and traditions. But I understand why this matters to Christians. Thank you for helping us, Marcus said. Of course, truth is truth, whether it makes us comfortable or not. That's a very Jewish principle, actually. They arrived in Jerusalem as the sun was setting. The golden light made the ancient city glow. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the beauty and history of the place. Somewhere in these streets, Jesus had walked. Somewhere here, history had been made. That evening, Rabbi Goldstein invited them to her home for dinner. Her house was in a quiet neighborhood in Jerusalem, filled with books, artwork, and family photos. Her husband, a doctor, and their 2 teenage children welcomed the visitors warmly. Over dinner, hummus, falafel, fresh salads, and warm pita bread, Rabbi Goldstein shared her perspective on the controversy. Here's what I don't understand, she said, passing a bowl of olives around the table. Why are Christians so resistant to the idea that Jesus looked like the people of his region? He was born in Bethlehem, grew up in Nazareth, lived in Galilee. He was a Jewish man from the Middle East. Of course, he didn't look like a European. Her teenage daughter, about 16 years old, spoke up. At school, we learned about how the Romans kept detailed records of the people they conquered. They described what people in different provinces look like, and the descriptions of people in Judea and Galilee don't match the white Jesus in Christian paintings at all. That's exactly right, Miriam, Rabbi Goldstein said proudly. Then she turned to her guests. Tomorrow, I'm taking you to the Israel Museum. They have ancient manuscripts, artifacts, and artwork that will interest you. But tonight, I want to show you something special. She left the room and returned carrying a large old book. The leather cover was worn, the pages yellowed with age. This is a family heirloom, she explained. A Jewish text from the 1500s, illustrated by my ancestors who lived in Yemen. Look at the pictures. She opened the book carefully. The pages showed beautifully illustrated Bible stories. Abraham and Sarah, Moses and the Exodus, King David, the prophets, and every single person in the illustrations had dark brown skin and distinctly Middle Eastern or African features. My ancestors painted biblical figures to look like themselves, Rabbi Goldstein said, because they understood that the ancient Hebrews were people of color by today's standards who came from the Middle East, North Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula, who weren't white. That's a modern misconception. Father O'Connor stared at the illustrations, his hands trembling slightly as he touched the ancient pages. This is beautiful, and it makes so much sense. Why have I never seen anything like this before? Because European versions of history became dominant, Rabbi Goldstein said simply. When Europeans translated and published Bibles, they used European artwork. When they made religious films, they cast European actors. Slowly, everyone began to think of biblical figures as white, even though that's historically inaccurate. Marcus took photos of the illustrations with Rabbi Goldstein's permission. This was exactly the kind of evidence they needed. Proof that people from the region itself had always understood the racial reality of biblical times. After dinner, they talked late into the night. Rabbi Goldstein showed them maps of ancient trade routes, explained the diverse population of first-century Palestine, and discussed how African, Arab, Persian, Greek, and Roman people all mingled in the region. The Sea of Galilee, where Jesus did much of his ministry, she said, pointing to a map, was a major fishing center. It was surrounded by towns full of merchants, fishermen, and traders from all over the known world. The population was incredibly mixed. To imagine everyone looking the same is absurd. The next morning, they visited the Israel Museum. Rabbi Goldstein led them through exhibits showcasing artifacts from the Second Temple period, the era when Jesus lived, pottery, coins, jewelry, tools, and fragments of ancient texts. But what struck Marcus most powerfully was a small weathered stone. It was displayed in a glass case with the simple label, funerary inscription, 1st century AD, Jerusalem. The stone showed a carved face, simple but clear, and that face had a broad nose, full lips, and features that looked distinctly African. This, Rabbi Goldstein explained, is from a Jewish tomb in Jerusalem dated to around 50 AD. The person buried there was a Jewish resident of the city, living just 20 years after Jesus died. Notice the features. Omar took extensive photographs. This is perfect evidence. We need documentation of all these artifacts. They spent hours in the museum examining artifact after artifact. Each one painted the same picture. The population of ancient Palestine was diverse, with significant African and Middle Eastern characteristics. That afternoon, they traveled north to the Sea of Galilee. The landscape was beautiful, rolling hills, ancient olive trees, the sparkling blue water of the lake where Jesus had walked and preached. Rabbi Goldstein took them to an archaeological site near Capernaum, a town where Jesus had spent considerable time according to the Bible. Archaeologists were still excavating the area, uncovering houses, streets, and public buildings from the 1st century. Look at this. One of the archaeologists, a young Israeli woman named Dr. Rachel Cohen, showed them a recently uncovered mosaic floor. The mosaic depicted various fish species from the Sea of Galilee, along with human figures, fishermen, and their families. The human figures in the mosaic had dark skin. These mosaics were created around 100 AD, Dr. Cohen explained, by people who lived here depicting their own community, and this is how they showed themselves. Father O'Connor knelt beside the mosaic, running his fingers gently over the ancient stones. Marcus watched the priest's face, seeing the transformation happening in his mind and heart.
It's all true, Father O'Connor whispered. Everything Elon showed us is true. Jesus really did look like this.
That evening, as the sun set over the Sea of Galilee, the 4 travelers, Elon, Marcus, Amara, and Father O'Connor, stood on the shore. The water was calm, reflecting the orange and pink sky. Somewhere on this lake, 2,000 years ago, Jesus had called his first disciples. He'd walked on these waters, he'd calmed a storm. This changes everything, Father O'Connor said quietly. When I go back to Boston, when I stand in my church and look at the paintings on our walls, the blonde Jesus, the European disciples, I'll know they're wrong. I'll know the truth. What will you do? Marcus asked. Father O'Connor thought for a long moment. I'll tell my congregation the truth. I'll show them the evidence. And if they don't want to hear it, if they'd rather hold on to comfortable lies than face uncomfortable truth, well then maybe I'm not meant to be their priest anymore. Amara smiled. That's incredibly brave, Father. It's not brave, he said. It's just necessary. I took a vow to serve God and truth. I can't serve both while spreading lies, even unintentional ones. Elon, who had been quiet most of the day, finally spoke. Tomorrow, we'd fly to Egypt, then Ethiopia. We'll gather more evidence, take more photos, meet more scholars. By the time we return to America, we'll have documentation that no one can deny. Marcus looked out over the water, thinking about his grandmother Ruth one more time. She had never had the chance to see evidence like this. She believed based on faith and instinct. But now, her faith was being confirmed by science and archaeology. Grandma, Marcus whispered too quietly for the others to hear. We're doing it. We're bringing the truth to light. A cool breeze blew across the water, and for just a moment, Marcus felt like his grandmother was there with him, smiling. The team landed in Cairo, Egypt, the next morning. As their plane descended, Marcus pressed his face against the window, watching the sprawling city come into view. The pyramids of Giza rose from the desert in the distance, ancient and eternal. Below them, the Nile River snaked through the city like a ribbon of life, just as it had for thousands of years. But when they stepped off the plane, something felt different, wrong. A crowd of reporters waited at the private terminal, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Security guards struggled to hold them back. Mr. Musk? Mr. Musk? Is it true you're trying to make Jesus African? Professor Williams, are you being paid to destroy Christianity? Dr. Okonkwo, what do Nigerian Christians think about your claims? Elon's security team formed a protective barrier, rushing the group toward a waiting van. But not before Marcus heard one reporter shout, Father O'Connor, The Vatican has issued a statement condemning your involvement in this heresy. Father O'Connor stopped walking, his face went pale. What statement? He called back to the reporter, but the security team was already pushing them into the van. The door slammed shut and they sped away from the airport. Inside the van, Father O'Connor pulled out his phone. With shaking hands, he searched for news about the Vatican. His face crumpled as he read. "They're calling me a traitor," he whispered. The Vatican, they released a statement saying, "I've abandoned Catholic teaching." They're saying, "I'm spreading false doctrine that undermines the faith." Amara put her hand on his shoulder. "Father, you knew there would be opposition." "I knew, but I didn't expect the Vatican itself to condemn me. I'm just a parish priest from Boston. Why do they care what I think?" Marcus understood immediately, because you give them credibility. You're a white Catholic priest who's supposed to defend traditional teachings. When you publicly support evidence that Jesus was black, it threatens the entire power structure. They have to discredit you quickly before other priests start asking questions. Elon leaned forward from the front seat. "Father O'Connor, I can have my lawyers issue a response. We can fight this." But Father O'Connor shook his head. "No, let them say what they want. I know what I've seen. I know what the evidence shows. They can call me a traitor, a heretic, whatever they like. It doesn't change the truth." The van drove through Cairo's chaotic streets. Cars honked constantly. Street vendors sold everything from fresh fruit to phone chargers. Children played soccer in dusty lots. The city pulsed with life and energy. Their guide in Egypt was waiting at their hotel, Dr. Youssef Ibrahim, a Coptic Christian and professor of early church history at Cairo University. He was a small man in his 60s with dark brown skin, kind eyes, and a gentle smile. He wore a gold cross around his neck. "Welcome to Egypt," Dr. Ibrahim said, warmly embracing each of them. "Please don't worry about the reporters. They will always make noise. But we have work to do, important work." That afternoon, Dr. Ibrahim took them to the Coptic Museum in Old Cairo. The museum sat in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by ancient churches and narrow streets that hadn't changed much in centuries. The Coptic Orthodox Church, Dr. Ibrahim explained as they walked through the museum, has existed since the Apostle Mark founded it in Alexandria around 42 AD. We have maintained continuous worship for nearly 2,000 years, and throughout all that time, we have never painted Jesus as a white European. Why would we? We were Africans. We painted him to look like us. He led them through galleries filled with incredible artwork, icons painted on wood, showing Jesus, Mary, and the saints with dark skin and African features, ancient manuscripts with colorful illustrations, crosses, chalices, and religious objects decorated in distinctly Egyptian styles. Marcus stopped in front of one particular icon. It showed Jesus holding a child, his face full of compassion. His skin was dark brown, his hair tightly curled, his nose broad. The painting was dated to the 6th century AD, 15. "This is how my ancestors saw Jesus," Dr. Ibrahim said softly. "Not as a stranger from a foreign land, but as one of us. A Middle Eastern African man who understood our lives, our struggles, our hopes." Father O'Connor stared at the icon, tears running down his face. "Dr. Abraham, I need to ask you something. Do you think God is angry at European Christians for changing Jesus' image, for making him white?" Dr. Abraham considered the question carefully. "I don't think God is angry, but I think God is sad. Sad that we used his son's image to divide people instead of unite them. Sad that we made some people feel worthy and others feel worthless, based on skin color. God created all people in his image, black, white, brown, every shade. But we forgot that. We made God look like only some of us." That evening, Dr. Ibrahim took them to his church, the Hanging Church, one of the oldest Coptic churches in Cairo, built in the 3rd century AD. The church was beautiful, with wooden screens carved in geometric patterns, chandeliers hanging from high ceilings, and ancient icons covering every wall. A service was in progress. The prayers were chanted in Coptic, an ancient language descended from the language of the pharaohs. The congregation, mostly Egyptian Christians with dark brown skin, sang hymns that had been sung for over 1,000 years. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the sense of history and continuity. This church had stood here while Europe was still in the Dark Ages. These people had been Christians longer than most European nations had existed, and yet most Christians around the world knew nothing about them. After the service, several church members approached the group. An elderly woman named Miriam spoke to them in accented English. I am 84 years old, she said. When I was a young girl, British soldiers occupied Egypt. They told us we were backward, uncivilized, that we didn't understand Christianity properly. They showed us pictures of white Jesus and said, "This is what God looks like." But my grandmother told me, "Don't listen to them, child. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, just south of here. He was one of us, not one of them." Miriam touched Marx's hand. "Thank you for telling the truth. Thank you for showing the world what we have always known." But not everyone in Cairo welcomed their message. That night, back at their hotel, Marcus turned on the television. The news showed massive protests happening around the world. In Rome, thousands gathered outside the Vatican holding signs that read "Defend Jesus" and "Stop the Lies." In Houston, Texas, a megachurch pastor named John Mitchell spoke to his congregation of 15,000 people. The television showed him pacing the stage, his voice booming through microphones. "Elon Musk is trying to destroy Christianity. He wants to take away our Jesus and replace him with a false image. This is spiritual warfare, brothers and sisters. We must fight back." The crowd roared their approval, raising their hands, shouting, "Amen." In London, the debate raged on the BBC between scholars, religious leaders, and scientists. Some defended Elon's evidence. Others called it a hoax, a deliberate attack on Western civilization. Marcus switched off the television, feeling sick. This was exactly what he feared. Instead of bringing people together, the truth was tearing them apart. His phone rang. It was Nicole, his wife. "Marcus, baby, are you okay? I'm watching the news. People are going crazy. Some pastor in Atlanta said, you're working for Satan." Marcus laughed bitterly. "Yeah, I've heard worse today. When are you coming home? I'm worried about you. Someone spray painted our house. They wrote race traitor on the garage door." Marcus's heart sank. "What, Nicole, are you safe? Did you call the police?" "Yes, I called them. They came and made a report. But Marcus, I'm scared. What if these people try to hurt you when you come back?" "I'll be careful. I promise. We're gathering more evidence right now. Once people see everything, all the proof, they'll have to accept it." But even as he said those words, Marcus wasn't sure he believed them. Some people didn't want the truth. They wanted comfort, familiarity, the world they'd always known. The next morning brought more bad news. Dr. Amara Okonkwo showed them her phone. An article had been published in a major Nigerian newspaper with the headline, "Nigerian Scientist Betrays Her People, Works to Divide Christians." Amara's hands shook as she read parts of the article aloud. Dr. Amara Okonkwo, a Cambridge-educated archaeologist, has joined forces with billionaire Elon Musk in a scheme to cause division among Christians worldwide. Many Nigerian church leaders question her motives and her faith. "We don't need white billionaires to tell us what Jesus looked like," says Pastor Emmanuel Adeyemi of Victory Christian Center in Lagos. "This is creating confusion and conflict where there should be unity." "That's my pastor," Amara said, her voice breaking. "I grew up in his church. He baptized me, and now he's calling me a traitor on national television." Elon put down his coffee cup. "I'm sorry. This is my fault. I brought you all into this." "No," Marcus said firmly. "This isn't your fault. The truth is the truth, regardless of how people react to it. We knew this would be difficult." Father O'Connor's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his face went even paler than usual. "A bishop in Boston wants to meet with me as soon as I return. He says there will be consequences for my actions." The four of them sat in silence, each dealing with their own fears and doubts. Outside the hotel window, Tarot continued its normal rhythms, cars honking, people going to work, the call to prayer echoing from mosques across the city. Life went on, regardless of their crisis. Dr. Ibrahim arrived to take them to their next destination, the ancient city of Alexandria, on Egypt's Mediterranean coast. The drive took 3 hours through desert landscapes and small villages. Alexandria had once been one of the greatest cities in the ancient world. The famous Library of Alexandria had held the largest collection of knowledge in human history. The Pharos Lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, had guided ships into the harbor. It was a modern city of 5 million people, but traces of its ancient past remained. Dr. Abraham took them to the catacombs of Kamel Shokafa, underground tombs dating from the 2nd century AD. They descended stone steps into the cool darkness, their flashlights illuminating ancient walls. The tombs were decorated with a fascinating mix of Egyptian, Greek, and Roman art. But what caught Marcus's attention were the Christian symbols carved into the walls, crosses, fish symbols, and simple drawings of biblical scenes. Early Christians in Alexandria hid down here during persecutions, Dr. Ibrahim explained. They would worship in secret, paint images of Jesus and the apostles, and bury their dead. Look at these paintings. The paintings were simple, weathered by time, but still visible. They showed Christian figures with distinctly African and Middle Eastern features, dark skin, curly hair, full lips. These were painted by people who lived within 100 or 200 years of Jesus' death. Dr. Ibrahim said this is how they imagined him, because this is what people in the region looked like. The Mara took careful photographs of every painting, every carving, every symbol. So there's more evidence to add to their growing collection. But when they emerged from the catacombs back into the bright Egyptian sunlight, they found a small crowd waiting. Not reporters this time, protesters. About 20 people stood near their van, holding signs. Most were young Egyptian Christians, members of Coptic churches. But their signs surprised Marcus. Stop using Jesus for politics, faith, not race. We don't need Elon Musk. One young man, perhaps 25 years old, stepped forward. He spoke in English. Dr. Ibrahim, why are you helping these people? They're turning Jesus into a political statement. Christianity isn't about skin color. It's about salvation. Dr. Ibrahim responded calmly but firmly. Michael, I understand your concern, but we're not making this political. We're simply acknowledging historical truth. Jesus was from this region. He looked like people from this region. Why does that truth upset you? Michael's face flushed with anger because it's being used to attack white people. It's being used to say that European Christians are racist. My mother is from France. My father is Egyptian. This message makes me feel like I have to choose sides. Marcus stepped forward. Michael, you don't have to choose sides. The truth isn't that Jesus was only for black people or only for white people. The truth is that Jesus was for everyone. But for centuries, his image was used to make non-white people feel inferior. We're trying to correct that injustice, not create a new one. But you're creating division, another protester shouted. Before Elon Musk's press conference, Christians were united. Now we're fighting each other. Father O'Connor, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. His voice was strong, passionate. We were never united, we just pretended we were. In my church in Boston, we have no black members. 0. We worship a white Jesus in an all-white congregation and tell ourselves we're not racist. But we are, not because we hate black people, but because we've made them feel unwelcome. We've made God's house into a whites-only club. If acknowledging the truth creates division, then maybe we need that division so we can build real unity afterward. The crowd fell silent. Some protesters looked angry. Others looked thoughtful, uncertain. Michael shook his head. I don't know. I just don't know anymore. He turned and walked away. Several other protesters followed him while a few stayed, wanting to hear more. Back in the van, heading toward the airport for their flight to Ethiopia, the team processed what had happened. This is getting worse, Amar said quietly. The opposition is growing, and it's not just white conservatives. It's people of all races who feel threatened by this message. They feel threatened because change is scary, Marcus said. And people have built their entire faith identity around certain images, certain ideas. When you challenge those images, you challenge their sense of self. Elon, who had been on his phone, looked up. It's about to get even more complicated. I just got a message from my publicist. Pastor John Mitchell, that megachurch leader from Houston, has organized a rally in Washington, D.C. for next week. He's calling it Defend the Faith. He expects over 50,000 people to attend. 50,000? Father O'Connor repeated. That's larger than most cities in Ireland. And there's more, Elon continued. A counter rally is being organized by black church leaders. They're calling it Truth and Liberation. They're expecting similar numbers. Both rallies are scheduled for the same day at the National Mall. Police are worried about violence. Marcus felt his stomach drop. This was spiraling out of control. What had started as a scientific discovery was becoming a national crisis, possibly even an international one. Maybe we should stop, Amara said softly. Maybe we should go home, cancel the research publication, let things calm down. No, Marcus said immediately, surprising himself with his own certainty. No, we can't stop now. If we stop, if we back down, it sends a message that truth doesn't matter when it makes people uncomfortable. My grandmother didn't back down when police hit her with clubs during civil rights marches. She didn't back down when white people threatened her family. She kept pushing forward because she knew that truth and justice were worth fighting for. We have to do the same. Father O'Connor nodded. Professor Williams is right. We finish what we started. We gather all the evidence, we publish it, and we let people decide for themselves. But we don't retreat from truth just because truth is difficult. Elon looked at each of them. Are you all sure? Because once we publish the full research, there's no taking it back. Your lives will never be the same. You'll all face hatred, threats, maybe even violence. I can protect you financially, I can provide security, but I can't protect you from everything. So I need to know, are you all committed to seeing this through? Marcus thought about Nicole back home in Washington, D.C. with racist graffiti on their garage. He thought about his job at Howard University, which might be at risk. He thought about the comfortable life he'd built as a professor, teaching history without making waves. Then he thought about his grandmother, Ruth, who had given up comfort and safety to fight for justice. I'm committed, Mark said. Me too, I'm right at it. And me, Father O'Connor said. Elon smiled. And let's go to Ethiopia. Let's gather the final pieces of evidence, and then let's show the world the complete truth, regardless of the consequences. The plane took off from Alexandria, heading south toward Ethiopia. Below them, the Nile River sparkled in the afternoon sun, just as it had sparkled when Moses was found in a basket among its reeds, when Egyptian pharaohs ruled the world, when early Christians first brought their faith to Africa's shores. History was being made, again. And Marcus, despite his fears, felt honored to be part of it. The plane touched down in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia's capital city. As the sun was setting through the window, Marcus saw mountains in the distance, their peaks touched by golden light. The city sprawled below them, a mix of ancient traditions and modern development, of churches and high-rises, of donkey carts and luxury cars. Ethiopia felt different from Israel and Egypt. The air smelled of eucalyptus trees and spices. People moved with a dignity and confidence that came from knowing their country had never been colonized. While almost all of Africa had been conquered by European powers, Ethiopia had remained free, defeating Italian invaders at the Battle of Adwa. Their guide was waiting at the airport, Father Teklo Hale, a priest of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. He was in his 70s, thin and tall, with deep brown skin and wise eyes that seemed to see everything. He wore the traditional white robes of an Ethiopian priest, with a white turban wrapped around his head. Welcome, my friends, Father Teklo said in accented but clear English. Welcome to the land where Christianity has lived for over 1,700 years, where the Ark of the Covenant is said to rest, where our churches still use the ancient Chagese language. Welcome home. That last word struck Marcus powerfully. Home. As an African American, he'd always wondered about his ancestors' origins. Slavery had stolen that knowledge from his family, but standing here in Ethiopia, looking at Father Tekle's face, Marcus saw echoes of his grandmother Ruth, of his mother, of himself. Thank you for having us, Father Tekle, Marcus said, shaking the old priest's hand. Father Tekle smiled. I have been watching the news. I know why you are here. And I tell you this, Ethiopian Christians have known the truth for centuries. Jesus was not a white European. He was a son of the Middle East and Africa. This is not controversial to us. It is simply fact. They drove through Addis Ababa to their hotel. The city buzzed with evening activity. Restaurants filling with customers, street vendors selling coffee and injera, Orthodox churches glowing with candlelight as evening prayers began. Tomorrow, Father Tekle said, we will visit Aksum, the ancient capital of Ethiopia. It is there that Christianity first came to our land. It is there that you will see evidence that will complete your research. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep again. He stood on his hotel balcony, looking out over the city. Somewhere in this country, his ancestors might have lived before being captured and sold into slavery. The thought filled him with both sadness and connection. His phone buzzed. A text from Nicole. The news is showing the rallies being organized in D.C. Marcus, I'm scared. Come home, please. Marcus called her immediately. It was afternoon in Washington, D.C. Baby, Nicole said, her voice tight with worry. People are planning to protest outside Howard University. They're saying you're a false teacher, that you're leading students astray. The university president called. He wants to meet with you as soon as you get back. Are they going to fire me? I don't know, maybe. Some of the board members are upset, but others are defending you. It's split down the middle. Marcus felt a wave of fear. Teaching at Howard was his dream job. If he lost it, what would he do?
Nicole, I'm sorry this is affecting you, affecting our life.
Don't apologize for telling the truth, Nicole said firmly. Your grandmother Ruth would be so proud of you. I'm proud of you. Yes, I'm scared. Yes, this is hard, but you're doing the right thing. Keep going. After they hung up, Marcus felt strengthened by his wife's support, but the fear remained. What if this cost him everything? His job, his reputation, his safety. Father O'Connor appeared on the balcony next to him. The priest looked exhausted, older than his 68 years. Couldn't sleep either, Marcus asked.
No,
I just got off the phone with my bishop in Boston. He's not pleased. He says, I need to publicly recant everything I've said or face suspension from the priesthood. Will you recant? Father O'Connor was quiet for a long moment. 3 weeks ago, I would have said, 3 weeks ago, I would have said whatever they wanted me to say to keep my position, to avoid conflict. But now, he shook his head. Now I've seen too much. I've seen the evidence. I've touched ancient stones, looked at paintings created by people who lived in Jesus' time. I can't unsee that. I can't unknow what I know. What will you do? I'll tell the bishop the truth. And if that costs me my collar, then so be it. I'd rather lose my position than lose my integrity. Marcus put his hand on the older man's shoulder. You're a good man, Father. And I'm trying to be. But for the first time in a long time, I'm really trying. The next morning, they boarded a small plane for the flight to Axum in northern Ethiopia. The landscape below them was breathtaking: green highlands, deep valleys, terraced farms carved into mountainsides, small villages with round thatched roof houses. Father Tekle pointed out landmarks. There, that mountain, we call it Abuna Yosef. And there, see those churches? They are built in the traditional round style with thatched roofs, like the tabernacle in the book of Exodus. We maintain the ancient ways. When they landed in Axum, Marcus felt like he stepped back in time. The town was small, peaceful, filled with ancient stone structures. Tall obelisks called stelae rose into the sky, carved from single pieces of granite by ancient craftsmen. These stelae, Father Tekle explained, erected over 1,000 years ago to mark the tombs of kings. Axum was once a great empire controlling trade between Africa, Arabia, and the Roman world. It was here that Christianity came to Ethiopia in the 4th century. He led them to the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, the holiest site in Ethiopian Christianity. The original church dated to the 300s AD, though the current building was newer, having been rebuilt several times over the centuries. According to our tradition, Father Tekle said, the Ark of the Covenant, the chest that held the 10 Commandments, was brought here from Jerusalem and remains in this church to this day. Only one guardian monk is allowed to see it. Not even I have seen it with my own eyes. Whether the ark was really there or not, Marcus couldn't say, but the spiritual power of the place was undeniable. Pilgrims from across Ethiopia came here to pray, some traveling for weeks on foot, but Father Tekle hadn't brought them to Axum to see the church. He led them to a small museum next to the church, filled with ancient manuscripts, crosses, and religious artifacts. What I'm about to show you, Father Tekle said seriously, is kept from most visitors. That Mr. Musk contacted our patriarch, the head of our church, and explained your mission. The patriarch gave permission for you to see our most precious treasures. He led them into a back room, climate-controlled and dimly lit. On a table lay several ancient books, their leather covers worn with age, their pages made from animal skin parchment. These, Father Tekle said reverently, are among the oldest Christian manuscripts in the world. The Agrima Gospels, created between 330 and 650 AD. They contain the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, written in Giz, our ancient language. He carefully opened one of the books. The pages were decorated with beautiful illustrations, geometric patterns, depictions of biblical scenes, portraits of the Gospel writers and of Jesus himself. And every human figure in those illustrations had dark brown skin, curly black hair, and African features. Amara gasped. These are contemporary with the oldest Christian artwork in Europe, maybe even older. Older, Father Tekle confirmed. While Europe was in chaos after the fall of Rome, while Christianity was struggling to survive in the Mediterranean world, we in Ethiopia were thriving. We were copying scriptures, creating art, building churches. We preserved Christianity when it might have died elsewhere. Marcus stared at the illustrations. Here was Jesus, depicted as a black African man in a manuscript that was potentially 1,700 years old. This wasn't modern revisionism. This wasn't political correctness. This was how Christians had seen Jesus from the very beginning, at least in this part of the world. Father O'Connor knelt beside the table, tears streaming down his face. My whole life, he whispered, my whole life, I was taught that European Christianity was the original, the authentic version, that other expressions of Christianity were lesser, derivative. But this predates most European Christian art by centuries. This is more original than anything in Rome. Father Teckley placed a gentle hand on the Irish priest's shoulder. My brother, there is no white Christianity or black Christianity. There is only Christianity. But yes, Europeans have told a false story that they brought Christianity to Africa, when in truth, Africa and the Middle East had Christianity first. They taught it to Europe, not the other way around. Elon had been taking detailed photographs with a high-resolution camera. Now he looked up. Father Teckley, we need to show these manuscripts to the world. Can we publish these photographs? That is why the patriarch gave permission. He said, the world needs to know our story. For too long, we have been erased from Christian history. It is time to be seen again. They spent hours in that room, documenting every page, every illustration. Amara took notes on the artistic techniques, the pigments used, the style of the figures. Marcus studied the gaze text, which Father Teckley helped translate. But the most powerful moment came when Father Teckley brought out one more artifact, a piece of cloth, ancient and fragile, preserved behind glass. This cloth, he said softly, is believed to be from the 5th or 6th century. It was found in a tomb near here, wrapped around the body of a Christian saint. Over the centuries, the cloth absorbed oils and pigments from the body, and when we examine it with special light watch, he switched off the room's normal lights and turned on an ultraviolet lamp. The cloth began to glow faintly and an image appeared, the ghostly outline of a face, dark skin, a broad nose, full lips, tightly curled hair. This is what our people looked like 1500 years ago, Father Teckley said. This is what Jesus' followers looked like. This is the face of African Christianity. Marcus thought about the cloth that Elon had found near the Sea of Galilee, the one with a similar facial imprint. These two pieces of evidence from different countries, different time periods, but telling the same story. Father Teckley, Marcus asked, when European missionaries came to Ethiopia in the 1800s and 1900s, did they try to change how you depicted Jesus? The old priest's face darkened. Oh yes, Italian Catholic missionaries, especially, they told us our icons were wrong, our art was primitive, our traditions were corrupted. They wanted us to paint Jesus as a white man, to worship in Latin instead of gaze, to abandon our ancient practices, but we refused. The Ethiopian church stood firm. We said, we have been Christians for over 1,000 years. We do not need you to teach us our own faith. He smiled, showing gaps in his teeth. Some Ethiopians converted to Catholicism or Protestantism, but most of us remained Orthodox, remained true to our ancient traditions. And now, finally, the world is realizing that we were right all along. That afternoon, I traveled to Lalibela, another ancient Ethiopian town, famous for its rock-hewn churches. These churches, 11 of them, have been carved directly into solid rock in the 1100s. Not built with stones, but excavated downward into the earth. Marcus stood at the edge of one church, looking down at the cross-shaped structure carved into the red rock. It was an engineering marvel, a work of incredible faith and determination. King Lalibela built these churches, Father Teckley explained, because he wanted to create a new Jerusalem in Ethiopia. He wanted Ethiopian Christians to be able to make pilgrimages without traveling to the Holy Land, which was dangerous at that time because of wars. They descended into the churches, walking through tunnels carved into solid rock, emerging into vast chambers lit by candles. The walls were decorated with ancient paintings, all showing Jesus, Mary, and the saints with African features. Pilgrims filled the churches, praying, singing, some lying prostrate on the stone floors. Many had traveled for days to reach this holy site. They wore white shawls called natalas, and their prayers echoed off the stone walls. An elderly woman approached Marcus. She spoke in Amharic, and Father Teckley translated. She says she has been praying for 50 years that the world would recognize Ethiopian Christianity. She says you are an answer to her prayers. She wants to bless you. The woman placed her wrinkled hands on Marcus's head and spoke a blessing in Amharic. Marcus didn't understand the words, but he felt their power. He felt connected to this place, to these people, to this ancient faith that had survived for so many centuries. That evening, they sat with Father Teckley in a traditional Ethiopian restaurant. They ate injera with various stews, drank strong Ethiopian coffee, and talked about what they'd seen. I have a question, Father O'Connor said to Father Teckley. Your church has known for centuries that Jesus had dark skin. You've preserved this knowledge in your art, your manuscripts, your traditions. Why didn't you tell the rest of the world? Why did you let European Christians spread a false image? Father Teckley sipped his coffee thoughtfully. Who would have listened to us? When European colonizers came to Africa, they did not see us as equals. They saw us as savages, as people who needed to be civilized and Christianized. Even though we had been Christians longer than they had, if we had said Jesus looked like us, not like you, they would have laughed at us. Or worse, they would have used it as an excuse to attack us, to destroy our churches, to kill our priests. He set down his cup. So we kept our knowledge to ourselves. We preserved it in our monasteries, in our churches, in our manuscripts. We waited. We knew that someday the truth would come to light. And now, with your help, it has. Elon had been quiet most of the evening. Now he spoke. Father Tekla, we're going to publish our full research in 2 days. All the evidence from Israel, Egypt, Ethiopia, and our satellite and DNA data. The world is going to see everything. Are you prepared for what might happen? Some people will attack Ethiopian Christianity, will try to discredit your traditions. Let them try, Father Tekla said with a smile. We have survived Roman persecution, Islamic invasions, Italian fascism, communist dictatorship. We have survived for 1700 years. We will survive whatever comes next. Later that night, back at their hotel, the 4 researchers gathered in Elon's room. He connected his laptop to a large monitor and pulled up a document, the complete research paper they were about to publish. This is it, Elon said, 200 pages. Archaeological evidence, DNA analysis, historical documents, photographs of artwork from 3 countries, interviews with dozens of scholars, everything we've learned over the past 2 years. Are we ready to release it? They reviewed the document together, checking facts, examining photographs, reading the conclusions. The evidence was overwhelming. DNA analysis showed that first century Palestine had a diverse population with significant African ancestry. Archaeological findings depicted people with dark skin and African features. Ancient Christian artwork from Egypt and Ethiopia, dating from the earliest centuries of Christianity, consistently showed Jesus and his followers with African and Middle Eastern features. The European depiction of Jesus as white only became dominant after Christianity spread to Europe and European Christians gained political power. The white Jesus image was then used to justify colonialism, slavery, and racism for centuries. The paper concluded carefully, while we cannot state with absolute certainty what Jesus looked like, all available evidence suggests he had dark brown skin, tightly curled hair, and facial features consistent with Middle Eastern and Northeast African populations. The traditional European depiction is historically inaccurate. It's good, Marcus said. It's honest, careful, and backed by solid evidence. The backlash will be enormous, Amor warned, but the evidence speaks for itself. Father O'Connor nodded. Publish it. Let people see the truth. What they do with that truth is up to them. Elon's finger hovered over the publish button. Once I click this, there's no going back. Everyone's lives will change. Last chance to back out. No one moved. No one spoke. Elon clicked the button. The research paper went live on an open access website available to anyone in the world for free. Within minutes, had been downloaded thousands of times. Within an hour, millions. News organizations around the world picked up the story. Scientists began examining the evidence. Religious leaders started responding. Social media exploded with reactions. The truth was out there now. All of it. And the world would never be the same. Marcus stood at his hotel window, looking out at the ancient city of Lodilabela, at the rock churches illuminated by starlight. He thought about his grandmother Ruth, about all the ancestors who had been told they were less than human because they didn't look like the paintings of Jesus. Now, finally, the record was being corrected. The truth was free. The news spread faster than wildfire. Within 12 hours of the research paper's publication, it had been downloaded over 10 million times. News websites crashed from the traffic. Social media platforms lit up with debates, arguments, celebrations, and fury. Marcus woke up in his hotel room in Libelo to find his phone buzzing constantly. Hundreds of messages, thousands of notifications. He scrolled through them, his heart pounding. His colleague from Howard University, Dr. Patricia Henderson. Marcus, the research is brilliant. The board is meeting today to discuss your situation. Stay strong. A former student, Professor Williams, thank you. Showed my grandmother your research. She cried happy tears. An unknown number. You will burn in hell for your lies. Another unknown number. Race traitor. Another, God bless you for your courage. Marcus put down his phone, overwhelmed. He walked to the window and looked out at the Ethiopian dawn. The sun was rising over the ancient rock churches, painting the sky orange and pink. Birds sang their morning songs. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. The world was waking up to a new reality. Imran knocked at his door. When he opened it, she looked exhausted but excited. Have you seen the news? It's everywhere. Every channel, every website, every country. They went downstairs to the hotel restaurant where a television was mounted on the wall. The news played constantly, switching between different channels and languages. CNN showed massive crowds gathering in Washington, D.C. The reporter, a black woman with natural hair, spoke into the camera. We're here at the National Mall where two separate rallies are forming. Behind me, Pastor John Mitchell's Defend the Faith rally has drawn an estimated 40,000 people, mostly white evangelical Christians. And over there, on the other side of the mall, the Truth and Liberation rally, organized by black church leaders, has drawn similar numbers. Police are maintaining a buffer zone between the groups, hoping to prevent violence. The camera showed Pastor Mitchell on a stage, his voice booming through speakers. They want to take away our Jesus. They want to destroy 2,000 years of Christian tradition, but we will not let them. We will defend our faith. The crowd roared, holding signs that read, "Keep Christ Christian," and "Elon Musk is the Antichrist." Then the camera switched to the other rally. A black woman pastor stood at another stage, her voice equally powerful. For 400 years, they used a white Jesus to justify enslaving us. For 400 years, they told us we were cursed because of our skin. But today, we reclaim the truth. Jesus was one of us. God loves black people. That crowd erupted in celebration, singing gospel songs, raising their hands, some crying with joy. Father O'Connor entered the restaurant, his face pale. This is what I feared: division, anger, violence waiting to happen. Elon joined them, his laptop under his arm. It's not just America. Look at this. He opened his computer and pulled up news from around the world. In Lagos, Nigeria, thousands filled the streets in celebration. Churches held special services. People danced and sang, thanking God that their African heritage was finally being recognized in Christianity. In London, a debate raged on the BBC between theologians. A white British professor argued, "This is historically interesting, but it doesn't change Christian theology. Jesus' message transcends race." A black British pastor responded, "But his image doesn't transcend race. For centuries, his white image was used to oppress us. Acknowledging his true appearance is about justice, not just history." In Rome, the Vatican released a second statement. A cardinal spoke from St. Peter's Square. The Catholic Church acknowledges that artistic representations of Jesus have varied throughout history and across cultures. However, the Church's teaching remains focused on Christ's divinity and message, not his physical appearance. We caution against using this research to create division among the faithful. The statement was careful, diplomatic, not quite accepting the evidence, but not outright rejecting it either. In Jerusalem, Rabbi Sarah Goldstein was interviewed on Israeli television. As a Jew, I find this whole controversy fascinating, but somewhat puzzling. We've always known that Jesus was a Jewish man from the Middle East. Why are Christians so surprised that he looked Middle Eastern? In Mexico City, indigenous Christians held their own rally. The Mayan woman spoke to reporters. When Spanish conquistadors came to our lands, they showed us paintings of white Jesus and told us our brown skin was inferior. They destroyed our temples and built churches with white saints. Now we know the truth. Jesus looked more like us than like them. Marcus watched it all, feeling the weight of history shifting. This wasn't just about one man's appearance 2,000 years ago. This was about power, identity, justice, and healing.
Father Tekle joined them for breakfast.
The old Ethiopian priest seemed calm, almost amused by the global chaos. "Why are people so upset?" he asked, eating his injera. "Truth is truth. It does not change, because we finally acknowledge it." "People are upset because truth challenges their identity," Marcus explained. "For many white Christians, especially in America and Europe, their faith has been wrapped up with their racial identity. A white Jesus made them feel special, chosen, superior. Accepting a black Jesus means giving up that feeling. But that feeling was always false," Father Tekla said. "God does not favor one race over another." "The Bible is very clear about this." "You're right," Father O'Connor said quietly. "But false feelings can be very comfortable." "I know. I lived with them for 68 years. Elon's phone rang. He answered, listened, then his face grew serious. "We need to turn on the news, right now." He switched the television to an American news channel. The scene showed chaos at the National Mall in Washington, D.C. The two rallies, which had been separate, were now merging. Police officers in riot gear tried to keep the crowds apart, but people were pushing against the barriers.
Someone threw a bottle?
Then another. Shouting escalated to shoving. Fists flew. Police moved in with shields, trying to restore order. No, Marcus whispered, watching the violence unfold. This was his fault. His research. His truth. But then something unexpected happened. A young black woman from the Truth and Liberation rally stepped forward. She was maybe 19 or 20, wearing a Howard University t-shirt. She walked right up to the barrier separating the two groups. On the other side, a white man in his 60s wearing a Defend the Faith t-shirt stood facing her. His face was red with anger. The young woman held up her hands, showing she was unarmed, unthreatening. She spoke to the man, though the cameras couldn't pick up her words over the chaos. The man yelled something back at her. She kept talking, calm and steady. The man's face began to change. His anger softened. He said something, she said something back. And then, in front of thousands of people and millions watching on television, the man stepped over the barrier. He walked up to the young woman, and he hugged her. Both of them were crying. The crowd around them fell silent, watching. Then another person crossed the barrier, and another. Some to argue, yes, but many to talk, to listen, to try to understand. The violence stopped as quickly as it started. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. Maybe this could work. Maybe people could find their way through this. And his phone rang. It was Nicole. Marcus, baby, I'm here. I'm at the rally in D.C. I had to come. I couldn't stay home. Nicole, it's dangerous. There was just violence. I know. I saw it. I also saw that girl from Howard. Marcus, I know her. Her name is Jasmine Rodriguez. She was one of your students from last semester. Marcus remembered Jasmine, the 19-year-old with a Puerto Rican mother and African-American father who had told him after Elon's first press conference that she finally felt like she belonged in Christianity. She's so brave, Nicole continued. She just walked up to this angry white man and started talking to him, and now they're crying together and people around them are actually listening to each other instead of fighting. Marcus felt hope rising in his chest. Nicole, I'll be home tomorrow. I love you. I love you too. Come home safe. Over the next few hours, the situation in Washington continued to calm, and the two rallies didn't merge into one. That would have been asking too much, but the hostility decreased. People started having conversations across the divide. Not everyone. There were many stayed angry, stayed separated, but enough people were willing to listen that violence was avoided. That afternoon, Marcus received a call from Dr. Patricia Henderson, the dean at Howard University. Marcus, the board met this morning. It was intense. Some trustees wanted to fire you. They said you were bringing too much controversy to the university. Marcus's heart sank. And I reminded them that Howard University was founded on the principle that Black Lives Matter, that Black history matters, that Black truth matters. I told them that firing a professor for proving that Jesus was Black would betray everything this university stands for. We voted. You keep your job. You're safe. Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Thank you, Dr. Henderson. Thank you so much. Don't thank me. Thank your grandmother, Ruth. I knew her. You know, she was a student here in the 1950s. She was a fighter, just like you. After hanging up, Marcus felt a connection to his grandmother stronger than ever. She had walked these same hallways, fought these same battles, believed in these same truths. That evening, an unexpected message came through to Elon's phone. It was from the White House. The President of the United States wanted to meet with them when they returned. The President, Father O'Connor said, astonished, "Why?" Elon read the message. The President believes this issue has national significance. He wants to discuss how to promote healing and understanding across racial and religious lines. He's inviting religious leaders from all backgrounds to a summit at the White House. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility growing heavier. This was bigger than any of them had imagined. This wasn't just an academic discovery anymore. This was reshaping American society, global Christianity, the relationship between race and religion. They flew back to the United States the next day. As the plane crossed the Atlantic, Marcus looked out the window at the ocean below. His ancestors had crossed this ocean in enslaved ships chained in darkness, stripped of their names and their history. Now, centuries later, their descendant was helping to restore a piece of that history. When they landed in Washington, D.C., a crowd waited at the airport. Not protesters this time, supporters. Hundreds of people, black and white and brown, holding signs. Thank you for the truth. Jesus loves all his children. Faith beyond color. Nicole pushed through the crowd and threw her arms around Marcus. He held her tight, feeling like he might never let go. A reporter shouted a question, "Professor Williams, how does it feel to change Christianity?" Marcus looked at the camera. He thought carefully about his answer. "I haven't changed Christianity. I've just revealed what was always true. Jesus' message of love, justice, and equality, that hasn't changed. But maybe now more people will understand that his message includes everyone, Truly everyone, regardless of what they look like. Over the next few days, life became a whirlwind. Marcus gave interviews to news programs. He met with religious leaders. He spoke at churches, universities, and community centers. Everywhere he went, people wanted to hear about the evidence, about the journey, about what it all meant. At a Black Baptist church in Atlanta, Ebenezer Baptist Church, where his grandmother had worshiped, Marcus stood at the same pulpit where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had preached. The church was packed, every seat filled, people standing in the aisles. I want to tell you about my grandmother, Marcus began. His voice echoed through the sanctuary. Ruth Williams, many of you knew her. She sang in this choir. She taught Sunday school in the basement. She marched with Dr. King down Auburn Avenue. Heads nodded throughout the congregation. People remembered Ruth. When I was a little boy, I asked my grandma why Jesus in all the pictures looked so different from us. She told me something I never forgot. She said, "Baby, Jesus probably did look like us, but powerful people changed his picture to make themselves feel more important. They wanted everyone to think God looked like them. But God loves all his children equally, no matter what color they are." The congregation murmured agreement. Yes, Lord, tell it. My grandmother died 2 years ago, never knowing that science would prove her right. But somehow, I think she always knew. She always knew that truth finds its way to the light. It might take time. It might take struggle. It might cost us something. But truth is patient. Truth is persistent. Truth wins. The church erupted in applause. People stood, shouting encouragement, wiping tears. Marcus saw Betty Thompson in the crowd, the elderly white woman from Alabama who had traveled all this way to hear him speak. She was crying, nodding her head. Next to her sat a young black boy, maybe 10 years old. Her grandson, Marcus Guest, the one adopted from Ethiopia. After the service, Betty approached Marcus with the boy. "Professor Williams, this is Michael, my grandson. I wanted him to meet you." Michael looked up at Marcus with bright, curious eyes. "Mr. Professor, is it really true? Did Jesus look like me?" Marcus knelt down to be at eye level with the boy. "Yes, Michael, based on all the evidence we found, the science, the archaeology, the ancient paintings, Jesus probably had dark skin like yours. Maybe not exactly like yours, but much closer to you than to the pictures in most churches." Michael's face broke into the biggest smile Marcus had ever seen. "My teacher at school said I was making it up when I told her, but I wasn't. Jesus really did look like me." Betty wiped tears from her eyes. "Thank you, Professor. You've given my grandson something precious. The knowledge that he's fully part of God's story is worth more than anything." That moment stayed with Marcus. This was why the truth mattered, not just for history books or academic papers, but for children like Michael who needed to know they were valued, loved, seen by God. The White House summit happened the following week. Religious leaders from across America gathered in the East Room, Baptist preachers and Catholic bishops, rabbis and imams, evangelical pastors and Orthodox priests. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, every tradition, every background. The president spoke first. We are at crossroads. This discovery about Jesus' appearance has created division, yes, but it also offers us an opportunity to finally have honest conversations about race, religion, and power in America, to acknowledge past wrongs, to build genuine unity, not just pretend unity. The discussions that followed were difficult. Some religious leaders defended traditional depictions. Others welcomed the new evidence. Arguments flared. Voices were raised. But slowly, over hours of conversation, something shifted. People began listening to each other. Really listening. Pastor John Mitchell from Houston, the megachurch leader who had organized the Defend the Faith rally, stood up. His voice was different now, quieter, less certain. "I need to confess something," he said. "I've preached for 30 years in a church that's 98% white. We have 2 black families in a congregation of 15,000. 2. And I told myself that was okay, that people naturally worship with their own kind. But maybe the reason black families don't come to my church is because everything in my church, the pictures, the music, the culture, tells them they don't belong. Maybe I've been using a white Jesus to keep my church white." The room fell silent. Several people nodded slowly. And a black pastor from Chicago responded, "Thank you for that honesty, Pastor Mitchell. That takes courage. And I need to confess something too. I've preached for 20 years that white Christians are all racist, that they all hate us. But watching Father O'Connor, a white Catholic priest, risk his career to defend the truth about Jesus' appearance taught me something. White people aren't the enemy. Racism is the enemy. And some white people are fighting it harder than I gave them credit for. Father O'Connor, sitting near the back, felt tears on his cheeks again. He cried more in the past 2 weeks than in the previous 68 years of his life. The summit didn't solve everything. Problems that had existed for centuries couldn't be fixed in one meeting. But it was a start, a genuine start. As the summit ended, Marcus stood on the White House lawn, looking back at the building. His grandmother Ruth had never been to the White House. No president had invited her to discuss racial justice, but she'd fought anyway, marched anyway, believed anyway. And now, finally, her faith was being vindicated. Amara stood next to him. What do you think happens next? She asked. Marcus considered the question. I think churches will start changing. Slowly. Some will embrace the truth immediately. Others will resist for years. But eventually, the evidence is too strong to ignore. Eventually, people will have to acknowledge that Jesus looked different than they thought. And maybe, just maybe, that will help heal some of the damage that racism has done to Christianity. And what about you? Amara asked, what's next for Marcus Williams? Marcus smiled. I go back to teaching, back to Howard University, back to helping students understand that history matters, that truth matters, that their stories matter. That's enough for me. But even as he said it, Marcus knew his life had changed forever. He would never just be a history professor again. He was now part of history himself, part of a story that would be told for generations. The truth was out. The evidence was clear. Jesus was black, or at least he looked far more like people of African and Middle Eastern descent than like Europeans. And the world was slowly, painfully, beautifully learning to accept that truth. 3 months had passed since the research was published. Marcus stood in his office at Howard University, looking at the wall he'd recently redecorated. New pictures hung there now, photographs from his journey to Israel, Egypt, and Ethiopia, the ancient paintings, the rock-hewn churches, Father Tekle smiling in his white robes, Rabbi Goldstein holding that ancient Yemenite text, and in the center a photo of his grandmother Ruth, taken in 1965 at Ebenezer Baptist Church. She wore her Sunday best, a blue dress and a hat with flowers. Her face showed determination and hope, same expression she'd worn while marching for civil rights. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Professor Williams, your visitors. Marcus opened the door to find an unexpected group. Father O'Connor stood there looking different than Marcus had ever seen him. The priest wore regular clothes, jeans, and a sweater, no clerical collar. Behind him stood Pastor John Mitchell from Houston and a young woman Marcus recognized as Jasmine Rodriguez, the Howard student who had crossed the barrier at the rally in Washington. Father O'Connor? Marcus said, surprised. Come in, all of you. They entered his small office, finding seats wherever they could. Father O'Connor sat in the chair across from Marcus's desk. Pastor Mitchell leaned against the bookshelf. Jasmine sat on the floor, her back against the wall. You're probably wondering why we're here, Father O'Connor began. His Irish accent seemed softer somehow, gentler, and why I'm not wearing my collar. Marcus waited, saying nothing. I was suspended from the priesthood, Father O'Connor said. The words came out matter-of-factly, without self-pity. The Bishop of Boston gave me an ultimatum, recant everything I'd said about the research, publicly apologize, and promise never to discuss it again. But face suspension. I'm sorry, Marcus said quietly. Don't be. I chose suspension. And honestly, Marcus, I've never felt more free. For 30 years, I served an institution that told me what to think, what to say, how to interpret everything. I told myself it was about serving God, but really it was about serving the institution's power structure. Pastor Mitchell spoke up, his voice much quieter than the booming tone Marcus had heard on television. I need to tell you something, Professor Williams. After the White House summit, I went home to Houston. I stood in front of my 15,000 members and I told them the truth. I told them I'd been wrong about Jesus' appearance, wrong about how we'd use that appearance to exclude people, wrong about a lot of things. How did they respond? Marcus asked. Mitchell's laugh was bitter. 2/3 of my congregation walked out. Within a week, 10,000 people left my church. The board of elders voted to remove me as senior pastor. I lost everything, my salary, my position, my reputation in the evangelical community. Marcus felt a surge of guilt. Pastor Mitchell, I never wanted. Stop, Mitchell interrupted. This isn't your fault. It's mine. I built the church on comfortable lies instead of uncomfortable truths. I made people feel good about their prejudices instead of challenging them. What happened to me? I deserved it. I needed it. Jasmine spoke from her spot on the floor. But that's not the end of the story, Professor Williams. Tell him the rest, Pastor Mitchell. Mitchell's face softened. The 5,000 who stayed, they're different. We're different. We sold our massive church building and now we meet in a community center. We're actually integrated now with Black families, Hispanic families, Asian families. We're learning to worship together, to listen to each other, to share power instead of hoarding it. It's smaller, yes. It's harder, yes. But it's real in a way. My mega church never was. Father O'Connor nodded. Same with me. I left Boston and moved here to Washington, D.C. I started a small house church, just 30 people meeting in our living room. Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox, all worshiping together. We hang pictures of Jesus from different cultures, Ethiopian icons, Mexican folk art, Asian paintings. We're trying to show that Jesus belongs to everyone. Marcus felt overwhelmed by what he was hearing. These men had lost everything, their positions, their reputations, their comfortable lives, but they seemed happier now than before. Why are you telling me this? Marcus asked. Jasmine answered, because we want to show you what's happening. The media focuses on the conflict, the protests, the arguments, the division, but they're missing the real story. Churches are changing, Professor. Slowly, quietly, but it's happening. She pulled out her phone and showed Marcus photos. A Baptist church in Georgia that had replaced its European Jesus painting with diverse artwork. A Catholic church in California that now displayed icons from the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition. A Methodist church in Ohio that had started a Bible study focusing on African Christianity in the book of Acts. It's not just churches. Jasmine continued. It's seminaries too. I'm enrolled in a theology program here in DC. 3 months ago, they added a required course on African church history. Students are learning about Coptic Christianity, Ethiopian Orthodoxy, the North African Church Fathers. Information that was hidden for centuries is finally being taught. Marcus looked at the three of them, a suspended Irish priest, a disgraced megachurch pastor, and a young Latina student, and he saw hope, real hope, not the shallow kind that ignores problems, but the deep kind that faces problems honestly and still believes change is possible. There's something else, Father O'Connor said. He pulled a folder from his bag and handed it to Marcus. Museums are starting to change their exhibits. The Smithsonian is creating a new display about diverse depictions of Jesus throughout history. The Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York is doing the same. Art history textbooks are being rewritten. Marcus opened the folder and looked through the documents. Letters from museum curators, university professors, and religious institutions, all of them describing changes they were making in response to the research. A letter from the National Gallery in London caught his attention. I read, "We are adding explanatory plaques to our Renaissance paintings of Jesus, noting that these represent European artistic interpretations from the 14th, 16th centuries, not historically accurate depictions of a first century Middle Eastern Jewish man." This is incredible, Marcus whispered. It's more than incredible, Pastor Mitchell said. It's a revolution, a quiet revolution, but a revolution nonetheless. The images that shaped Christianity for centuries are being challenged, not destroyed, not erased, but contextualized. People are finally understanding that European Christianity isn't the only Christianity, maybe not even the most authentic Christianity. Jasmine pulled out more photos on her phone. Look at this, Professor. This is from my hometown in Puerto Rico. The photo showed a church with a new mural, Jesus with brown skin, surrounded by people of many different colors. And this is from a church in Seoul, Korea. Another photo showing Jesus with Asian features. And this is from a Native American church in New Mexico. Jesus depicted with indigenous features. What you and Elon Musk started, Jasmine said, gave people permission to see Jesus in their own image. Not instead of other images, but alongside them. It's like Christianity is finally becoming what it was supposed to be, universal. A thought occurred to Marcus. Have you talked to Amara, Dr. Okonkwo? Father O'Connor smiled. We have. She's still in Ethiopia working with Father Tekle. They're cataloging ancient manuscripts that have never been photographed before. She says Ethiopian monks are finally willing to share their treasures with the world because they feel like the world is ready to respect them. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Elon Musk. Turn on CNN now. Marcus grabbed his remote and switched on the small television in his office. CNN was showing a live press conference from Rome. A cardinal stood at a podium in Vatican City, reading from a prepared statement. After careful consideration and consultation with biblical scholars, historians, and scientists around the world, the Catholic Church acknowledges that artistic representations of Jesus Christ have been shaped by the cultural context of the artists who created them. While the Church's teaching remains focused on Christ's divinity and salvific mission, we recognize that European depictions of Jesus do not reflect the historical reality of a first-century Jewish man from Palestine. The Cardinal paused, then continued, "The Church encourages Catholics worldwide to appreciate diverse cultural expressions of faith and to recognize that Jesus Christ came for all people, regardless of race or ethnicity. We affirm that no single artistic representation can fully capture the mystery of the Incarnation." Marcus stared at the screen in disbelief. The Vatican, the institution that had condemned Father O'Connor, was now essentially agreeing with the research.
It's not a full acceptance, Father O'Connor said, watching the screen. They're being careful, diplomatic, but it's movement, real movement. 6 months ago, this statement would have been impossible.
Pastor Mitchell nodded. The Southern Baptist Convention is holding their annual meeting next month. I've heard rumors that they're going to issue a resolution acknowledging the harm caused by using white Jesus imagery to justify racism. It might not pass. There's still tremendous resistance, but the fact that it's even being discussed is huge. Over the next hour, more visitors arrived at Marcus's office. Dr. Patricia Henderson, the dean of Howard University, came with news that the university was launching a new research institute focused on African contributions to world religions. A publisher arrived with a contract for Marcus to write a book about his journey. A documentary filmmaker wanted to interview him. But the visit that touched Marcus most deeply came late in the afternoon. An elderly black man, perhaps 90 years old, was wheeled into the office by his granddaughter. The man's hands shook with age, but his eyes were clear and bright. "Professor Williams," the granddaughter said, "this is my grandfather, James Washington. He wanted to meet you before his time comes." Marcus knelt beside the wheelchair. "Mr. Washington, it's an honor." The old man's voice was weak but steady. "I was born in Mississippi in 1935. Grew up during Jim Crow. White people told us we were cursed by God because of our skin. They showed us pictures of white Jesus and said, 'See, even God doesn't look like you.' I believed them for a long time. Believed I was less than human." He reached out and grabbed Marcus's hand with surprising strength. "Then I saw you on television. Saw the evidence, saw these ancient paintings of Black Jesus, and for the first time in 90 years, I felt worthy to be a child of God. Thank you, young man. Thank you for giving an old man peace before he dies." Tears streamed down Marcus's face. This was why the truth mattered. Not for academic journals or museum exhibits, but for people like James Washington, who had carried shame their entire lives because of lies about God's image. That evening, Marcus returned home to Nicole. She had dinner waiting, his favorite fried chicken and collard greens. They ate together, talking about the visitors, the changes happening around the world, the hope mixed with continued resistance. "Your grandmother would be so proud," Nicole said, and squeezing his hand across the dinner table. "I wish she could have seen this, seen the evidence, seen people's hearts beginning to change." "She did see it," Nicole said softly. "Maybe not with her physical eyes, but she saw it in her faith. She knew this day would come. She told you so, remember? The truth always finds its way to the light." Marcus smiled, remembering. His grandmother Ruth had been right about so many things. Later that night, Marcus received an email from Rabbi Sarah Goldstein in Jerusalem. She wrote, "Dear Marcus, I wanted you to know that Jewish-Christian dialogue has reached a new level here in Israel. For years, conversations were difficult because Christians felt defensive about their history of anti-Semitism, and Jews were suspicious of Christian motives. But your research has opened a new avenue. We can now discuss Jesus as a historical Jewish figure without the baggage of European Christianity. It's creating space for healing. Thank you." Marcus leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed by the ripple effects of what had started as a simple archaeological discovery. The evidence had done more than prove a historical fact. It had opened doors, started conversations, challenged assumptions, and forced people to confront uncomfortable truths about power, race, and religion. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from Emma in Ethiopia. "Marcus, Father Tekle wants you to come back. He has found something new, something important. Can you come?" Marcus looked at the message, then at Nicole, who had been reading over his shoulder. "Go," she said. "Finish what you started." Marcus typed back, "I'll be there next week." Because the work wasn't finished. Maybe it would never be finished. Truth wasn't a destination, but a journey, and that journey required constant courage, constant honesty, constant willingness to challenge comfortable lies. Marcus walked to his office wall and looked at his grandmother's photograph one more time. Her determined face, her hopeful eyes, I'm still walking your path, Grandma, he whispered. Still fighting your fight. Still believing that truth wins in the end. And somewhere in whatever realm Ruth Williams now inhabited, Marcus felt certain she was smiling. 1 year had passed since Elon Musk's press conference in Austin, Texas. Marcus stood at the airport in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, breathing in the familiar scent of eucalyptus and spices. He'd been back 3 times since that first visit, each time discovering something new about African Christianity, about history, about himself. Father Tekla waited at arrivals, his white robes bright against the crowd. The old priest looked thinner than before, more fragile, but his smile was as warm as ever. Welcome home, my friend, Father Tekla said, embracing Marcus. I have missed you. I have missed you too, Father. Your message said you found something important.
Yes, yes.
But first we eat, then we talk. Ethiopian hospitality requires proper order. They drove to Father Tekla's home, a simple house near an ancient church in Addis Ababa. Inside, Amar was waiting, along with several Ethiopian scholars Marcus had met on previous visits. Over in Jirin, what? They caught up on the past few months. Amar had told stories about cataloging manuscripts in remote monasteries. One scholar described how Ethiopian Christianity was finally being included in world religion textbooks. Another talked about young Ethiopians taking pride in their ancient Christian heritage, no longer feeling inferior to European Christianity. But you're wondering why I called you here, Father Tekla said as they finished eating. Come, I will show you. He led them to his church, an old stone building that had stood for over 400 years. Inside, the familiar smell of incense and old wood greeted them. Icons covered the walls, candles flickered in the dimness. Father Tekla took them to a back room Marcus had never seen before. There was a small library filled with ancient manuscripts wrapped in cloth, protected from dust and light. For 1,000 years, Father Tekla began, Ethiopian monks have preserved knowledge. During the Dark Ages in Europe, during Islamic invasions, during times of war and famine, we kept these books safe. We kept the faith alive. But we also kept secrets. He carefully unwrapped one manuscript, old beyond imagining, its pages made from animal skin, its ink faded but still readable. This manuscript was written in the year 550 AD. It contains letters, actual letters written by Ethiopian Christians who traveled to Palestine and met people who had known Jesus' disciples. Second-generation Christians, we would call them, people whose grandparents had walked with Jesus. Marcus's heart raced. Letters from the 500s AD? That's incredibly early. What do they say? Father Tekla opened the manuscript carefully. This letter is from a monk named Abba Johannes. He traveled to Jerusalem in 540 AD and met an elderly woman named Miriam. She was 90 years old. Her grandmother had been a follower of Jesus. Her grandmother knew Jesus personally, Amara whispered. That's only 2 generations removed. That's like talking to someone whose grandmother knew Abraham Lincoln. Exactly, Father Tekla said. And here's what Miriam told Abba Johannes. I will translate from the gaze. My grandmother Tabitha was a young woman when the teacher walked through our villages. She saw him with her own eyes. She said he looked like us, dark skin burned by the sun, curly hair, like sheep's wool, hands rough from carpentry work. She said he smiled often and his eyes were kind. She said he looked like her brothers, like her father, like all the men of our region. The room fell silent. This wasn't archaeological evidence or DNA analysis. This was an eyewitness account passed down through a family, recorded by a monk 15 centuries ago. There's more, Father Tekla continued, turning pages carefully. Abba Johannes wrote down many such accounts. Here, another elderly person described Jesus as having the appearance common to men of Galilee, strong build, dark complexion, features shaped by sun and labor. And here another account describing Jesus' mother Mary as a woman of dignified bearing, with skin the color of dates, hair covered in the manner of our people. Marcus felt like he was touching history itself. These weren't interpretations or artistic representations. These were descriptions from people whose families had actually seen Jesus. Why didn't you show us this a year ago? Marcus asked. Father Tekla smiled sadly. Because a year ago, the world was not ready. If I had shown you this manuscript, then people would have called it fake, forged, a trick to support your research. But now, after a year of other evidence, after scientists have verified the archaeology and DNA, after people have begun accepting the truth, now they might believe these ancient words. One of the Ethiopian scholars, a woman named Dr. Bethlehem Desta, spoke up. We have found similar accounts in other monasteries, letters, journals, and historical records from early Ethiopian Christians who traveled throughout the Mediterranean world. They all described the same thing. Early Christians in Palestine, Egypt, and North Africa had dark skin and African features. How many such documents exist? Amara asked, her voice filled with excitement. We have found 14 so far, Dr. Desta said, all from between 400 and 700 AD. All containing similar descriptions. We are still searching through monastery archives. There may be more. Marcus paced the small room, his mind working. This is incredible. These accounts support everything we've already proven, but they add something even more powerful, human voices from the past. Real people describing what they saw or what their family saw. Yes, Father Tekla said, but there is something else, something that I think is even more important than these descriptions. He pulled out another manuscript, newer than the others, perhaps from the 1200s. This is a collection of sermons by an Ethiopian bishop named Abune Tekle Haminat. He lived in the 13th century during a time when crusaders from Europe were trying to control the Holy Land. Listen to what he wrote. Father Tekla read aloud, translating as he went. The Franks, the European Christians, have come to our lands, claiming to be the true followers of Christ. They say that we Africans are inferior, that our faith is corrupted, that we do not know the real Jesus. But I say to you, my children, who walked with Jesus, who were his first followers, people who looked like us, not like the Franks, who preserved Christianity when Rome fell. We did, here in Africa and in the East, who truly follows Jesus' teachings of humility and service, not those who conquer and kill in his name. Father Tekla closed the book. I see, Marcus, this controversy about Jesus' appearance, about who has the right to define Christianity, this is not new. It has been going on for over 1,000 years. European Christians have been trying to claim ownership of Jesus for centuries, and African Christians have been resisting that claim for centuries. Marcus felt the weight of that history. His own struggle, his own research was just one small part of a much longer story. So what do we do with this information? Marcus asked. Do we publish it, add it to the research? That is why I called you here, Father Tekla said, to ask that question, to decide together. They debated for hours. Some argued they should publish immediately, while the world's attention was still focused on the issue. Others wanted to wait to have more scholars examine the manuscripts to build an even stronger case. Finally, Amara spoke up. I think we need to ask ourselves, what's the goal? Is it to win an argument, to prove we're right, or is it something deeper? What do you mean? Marcus asked. I mean, what are we really trying to accomplish? Maybe when I started this journey, I thought I was just doing archaeology, finding facts, but now I realize we're doing something much bigger. We're trying to heal wounds. We're trying to help people see each other as equals. We're trying to restore dignity to people who've been told they're less than. Father O'Connor, who had joined them via video call from Washington, spoke from the laptop screen. Amara's right. The evidence is important, yes, but the evidence is just a tool. The real work is changing hearts. Father Tekla nodded slowly. When Jesus walked the earth, he could have written books. He could have left detailed descriptions of himself, paintings, sculptures, but he didn't. He left teachings. He left a message of love. He left relationships. Maybe that's what matters most, not what he looked like, but what he taught. Marcus thought about his grandmother Ruth again. She had never seen the evidence he'd gathered. She had never held ancient manuscripts or examined DNA analysis, but she had known the truth anyway, through faith and intuition and lived experience. I think Marcus said slowly, we should publish these manuscripts, but not just as more proof that Jesus was black. We should publish them as evidence of something bigger, that Christianity has always been diverse, that there has always been resistance to European dominance, that African Christians have always known their own worth. Yes, Father Tekla said, smiling. Yes, that is exactly right. Over the next week, they worked to photograph and translate the manuscripts. Dr. Desta and other Ethiopian scholars provided historical context. Amara documented the preservation methods used to keep these ancient texts intact. But Marcus also did something else. He spent time talking to ordinary Ethiopian Christians, farmers, shopkeepers, students, elderly people. He asked them what it meant to them that the world was finally recognizing African Christianity. An old woman named Astor told him, my whole life, people told me Africa received Christianity from white missionaries, but my grandmother told me different. She said, we had the faith long before Europeans. Now the world knows she was right. A young man named Doet said, I used to be ashamed of being both African and Christian. I thought Christianity was a white religion forced on us, but now I understand Christianity is our heritage too. We preserved it, we protected it, we lived it. A teacher named Solomon explained, what you've done isn't just about Jesus' skin color, it's about giving us back our history, about showing that we matter in God's story. Marcus recorded these conversations knowing they were as important as any ancient manuscript. On his last night in Ethiopia, Father Tekle invited Marcus to a special ceremony at his church. Hundreds of people gathered, dressed in traditional white clothes, holding candles. They sang hymns and gaze, the ancient language. The music was beautiful, haunting, unlike anything Marcus had heard in American churches. During the ceremony, Father Tekle called Marcus to the front. The old priest placed his hands on Marcus's head and prayed in Amharic. Marcus didn't understand the words, but he felt their power. And after the ceremony, Father Tekle translated what he prayed. I bless you as a truth teller. I prayed that God would protect you as you continue this work, and I prayed that your grandmother's spirit would guide you, because I believe she is proud of you. Marcus couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears streaming down his face. The next morning, as Marcus prepared to fly back to Washington, Father Tekle gave him a final gift, a small wooden cross carved from olive wood. This cross was made in Jerusalem, Father Tekle said, by a Palestinian Christian craftsman. It reminds us that Jesus was from that land, from that people. Keep it with you. Remember that truth is stronger than lies, that love is stronger than hate, that light always defeats darkness. Marcus held the cross carefully. Father Tekle, you've taught me so much about history, about faith, about courage. Thank you. No, my friend. Thank you. You came to Ethiopia seeking evidence. But what you gave us was dignity. You showed the world that African Christianity matters, that our history matters, that we matter. That is a gift beyond price. On the flight back to America, Marcus thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The press conference in Austin, the journey through Israel, Egypt, and Ethiopia, the global reaction, both positive and negative, the changes beginning to happen in churches and institutions. But most of all, he thought about the people. James Washington, the 90-year-old man who had felt worthy for the first time, young Michael, the boy adopted from Ethiopia, who learned that Jesus looked like him, Jasmine Rodriguez, the student who had crossed barriers to build bridges, Father O'Connor, who had lost his position but found his integrity, Pastor Mitchell, who had lost his megachurch but gained authentic community. These were the real revelations, not ancient manuscripts or DNA evidence, but transformed hearts, not scientific proof, but spiritual healing. Marcus pulled out his phone and composed a text to Nicole, coming home tomorrow, I love you. And I think I finally understand what Grandma Ruth knew all along, that truth isn't just about facts, it's about freedom. Nicole texted back immediately, can't wait to see you. Also, guess what? I'm pregnant. Marcus stared at the message, then burst into tears, happy tears this time. EB, new life, a new generation, who would grow up in a world where Jesus looked like everyone, where Christianity embraced its full diversity, where children of all colors could see themselves in their faith. He placed his hand on the airplane window, looking out at the clouds below. Somewhere down there was Africa, the cradle of humanity, the birthplace of so much history, the home of Christianity for nearly 2,000 years. And somewhere beyond the clouds was his grandmother Ruth, smiling down. The truth had been revealed. The work would continue. But for now, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. 2 years later, Marcus stood in the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. His 2-year-old daughter, Ruth, named after her great-grandmother, held his hand as they walked through the new exhibit titled The Forgotten Colors of Faith, Christianity's African Heritage. The exhibit had opened that morning to massive crowds. People lined up around the block to see it, and Marcus had been invited to give the opening speech. Now, as he walked through the galleries before the official ceremony, he saw his journey displayed on these walls. Photographs of the ancient tomb near the Sea of Galilee, and replicas of the Ethiopian manuscripts, DNA analysis charts, paintings from Coptic churches, the cloth with the facial imprint displayed behind protective glass. But what moved him most was the final room of the exhibit. It showed not ancient history, but recent history, a transformation that had happened over the past 2 years. Photographs of churches that had changed their artwork, a Baptist church in Georgia, a Catholic church in California, a Methodist church in Ohio, all displaying diverse images of Jesus. Interview videos played on screens showing people describing how the research had changed their faith, their understanding, their hearts. One video showed Betty Thompson elderly white woman from Alabama sitting with her grandson Michael. And 12 years old, Michael spoke confidently. I used to think Christianity wasn't for me because I didn't look like the pictures in church. But now I know that Jesus looked like me, and that changes everything. Another video showed Pastor John Mitchell in his new, smaller church. The congregation was truly diverse. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian families worshiping together. I lost my megachurch, Mitchell said to the camera, but I found my soul. I found authentic community. I found the real Jesus. Father O'Connor appeared in another video, no longer suspended, but restored to ministry in a new capacity. He now served as a bridge builder, traveling to churches across America, helping them have honest conversations about race, history, and faith. The truth set me free, he said simply. I thought it would destroy me, but it saved me. Little Ruth tugged on Marcus's hand. Daddy, look, it's you. Marcus saw his own face on a screen from an interview he'd done 6 months ago. His voice played through speakers. My grandmother always told me that truth finds its way to the light. She was right. But what she didn't tell me, what I had to learn for myself, is that truth isn't just about facts. Truth is about seeing people as they really are, loving them as they really are, recognizing their full humanity and their full dignity. Nicole appeared beside them, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. They were expecting their second child, a boy they planned to name David, after King David, a reminder that biblical heroes came in all shades. You ready for your speech? Nicole asked, squeezing Marcus's free hand. As ready as I'll ever be. They made their way to the museum's main hall, where hundreds of people had gathered. Marcus saw familiar faces in the crowd. Dr. Amara Okonkwo had flown in from Ethiopia, where she now directed a new institute for African Christian studies. Elon Musk sat in the front row, flanked by security but smiling warmly. Father O'Connor and Pastor Mitchell sat together, their unlikely friendship a symbol of the bridges being built. Rabbi Sarah Goldstein was there from Jerusalem. Tuckle had sent a video message. His health no longer allowed international travel. Jasmine Rodriguez, now a graduate student in theology, sat with other young scholars who were part of the new generation, studying Christianity's diverse heritage. And there, in the front row, Marcus saw something that made his breath catch. A photograph of his grandmother, Ruth, enlarged and framed, placed in a seat of honor. The museum director had arranged it as a tribute. Marcus walked to the podium, carrying little Ruth in his arms, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the crowd. Cameras flashed. The room fell silent. Thank you for coming, Marcus began. 2 years ago, I stood in a press conference in Austin, Texas, watching Elon Musk reveal evidence that challenged everything many people believed about Jesus' appearance. I had no idea then how that moment would change my life, change so many lives, change the conversation about faith and race in America and around the world. Little Ruth squirmed in his arms. He set her down, and she ran to Nicole, drawing gentle laughter from the crowd. I want to tell you what I've learned over these past 2 years, Marcus continued. Because it's not what I expected to learn. I thought this would be about proving a historical fact, about using science and archaeology to show what Jesus really looked like. And yes, we did that. The evidence is clear. Jesus was a first-century Jewish man from Palestine. He had dark skin, features common to Middle Eastern and Northeast African populations. He looked nothing like the European paintings that dominated Christianity for centuries. He paused, letting those words settle. But here's what I didn't expect. I didn't expect to learn that the image of Jesus has been used as a weapon. For hundreds of years, powerful people used a white Jesus to justify terrible things. Slavery, colonization, segregation, the idea that some people are more worthy than others. They said, look, even God is white. That proves white people are superior. And millions of black, brown, and indigenous people internalized that message. They believed that God didn't look like them, didn't love them as much, didn't value them equally. His voice grew stronger. My grandmother Ruth grew up in that world. She grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, during Jim Crow. White people told her she was less than human. They showed her pictures of white Jesus and said, see, even God isn't black. But my grandmother didn't believe them. She knew, deep in her soul, that God loved all his children equally. She knew that Jesus probably looked more like her than like the paintings in white churches. Marcus looked at his grandmother's photograph in the front row. She died without seeing the proof, but she didn't need proof. She had faith, and she passed that faith to me. He walked away from the podium, closer to the audience, speaking more conversationally now. Over the past 2 years, I've received thousands of messages. Some angry calling me a liar and a heretic, a destroyer of Christianity, but many more, so many more thanking me for giving them permission to see themselves in their faith, to believe that God loves them, all of them, exactly as they are. A woman from Kenya wrote to me, I spent 30 years ashamed of my dark skin. I tried to bleach it lighter because I thought God preferred light skin. Now I know God made me this way on purpose. I am beautiful as I am. A man from Brazil wrote, I am mixed African, indigenous, and European heritage. I never knew where I fit. Now I know Jesus was mixed too, in a sense. He came from a diverse region, from a people who had mingled with many others. He is for all of us. A young girl from India wrote, I stopped going to church because all the pictures showed white people. I felt like I didn't belong, but my mother showed me your research. Now we go to a church that has pictures of Jesus from many cultures. I belong now. Marcus felt tears on his cheeks. That little girl belongs. That woman from Kenya belongs. That man from Brazil belongs. They always did belong, but lies told them they didn't. Truth gave them back what lies had stolen, their dignity, their worth, their place in God's family. And the audience was silent, many people wiping their own tears. But here's the most important thing I've learned, Marcus said. This isn't really about Jesus' skin color, not ultimately, because whether Jesus was dark-skinned or light-skinned, whether he had curly hair, straight hair, whether his nose was broad or narrow, none of that changes his message. Love your neighbor, feed the hungry, welcome the stranger, forgive your enemies, stand up for justice. Those teachings don't change based on skin color. So why does it matter? Someone in the audience called out. Marcus smiled. It matters because lies matter. It matters because for centuries, people used a false image to oppress others. It matters because children like my daughter Ruth should grow up seeing Jesus depicted in all kinds of ways. Black, white, Asian, indigenous, every beautiful shade of humanity. It matters because truth is better than lies. Always, even when truth is uncomfortable. He returned to the podium. I want to read you something. These are words from one of the ancient Ethiopian manuscripts that Father Tekla showed me, written in 550 AD by a monk who spoke to people whose grandparents had known Jesus personally. Marcus pulled out a paper and read. They asked me what the teacher looked like. I tell them he looked like a man. He looked like his neighbors. He looked like the people he came to serve. He looked like love made flesh. His appearance was ordinary, but his message was extraordinary. And that message that God loves all people, that all people are created in God's image, that all people have equal worth. That message is what we must remember. Not the color of his skin, but the content of his character. Not the shape of his face, but the shape of his love. Marcus folded the paper, content of character. That phrase sounds familiar, doesn't it? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said something similar in his famous speech. He dreamed of a day when people would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That dream is rooted in the message of Jesus. And my grandmother Ruth, who marched with Dr. King, believed in that dream with her whole heart. He looked at Ruth's photograph again. Grandma, we're still working on your dream. We haven't achieved it yet. There's still racism, still inequality, still people who resist the truth. But we're making progress. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, we're making progress. Marcus gestured to the exhibit around them. This museum, these artifacts, this evidence, they're not the end of the journey. They're mile markers. They show how far we've come, but there's still further to go. He pointed to different people in the audience. Father O'Connor lost his position for telling the truth, but he found his integrity. Pastor Mitchell lost his megachurch, but he found authentic community. Okonkwo faced criticism from her own people, but she stayed committed to scholarship and truth. Elon Musk used his resources not for personal gain, but for uncovering historical reality. All of these people sacrificed something for truth. That's what truth requires, sacrifice. Little Ruth wiggled free from the coal and toddled toward Marcus. He picked her up again, holding her close to the microphone. This is my daughter Ruth, named after her great-grandmother. She's 2 years old. She'll grow up in a different world than my grandmother did. She'll grow up seeing Jesus depicted in diverse ways. She'll learn about Ethiopian Christianity, Coptic Christianity, the African roots of faith. She'll know that Christianity isn't a white religion imposed on people of color. It's a Middle Eastern religion that spread to Africa before it spread to Europe. But more importantly, Marcus continued, bouncing Ruth gently. She'll grow up knowing that she's loved by God, exactly as she is. She won't have to question whether God values her because of her skin color. She'll know deeply, certainly, that she's created in God's image. That's the gift truth gives us. That's why this matters. He set Ruth down again, and she ran back to Nicole. Marcus took a deep breath. I want to end by thanking the people who made this possible. Elon Musk, who had the courage to pursue truth even when he knew it would be controversial. Dr. Amara Okonkwo, whose scholarship and dedication uncovered evidence that had been hidden for centuries. Father Tekle Hale in Ethiopia, who preserved ancient knowledge and shared it with the world. Rabbi Sarah Goldstein, who helped us understand the historical context. Father David O'Connor and Pastor John Mitchell, who had the courage to change their minds when presented with evidence. And my wife, Nicole, who supported me through every difficult moment. The audience applauded. Marcus waited for silence to return. But most of all, I want to thank my grandmother, Ruth. She didn't live to see this day, but she made this day possible. She taught me that truth matters. She taught me that justice matters. She taught me that dignity matters. She taught me to be brave, even when being brave is scary. He paused, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Grandma, you were right. The truth found its way to the light, just like you said it would, just like you always believed it would. Thank you for your faith. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for passing those gifts to me. Marcus looked out at the audience one final time. Here's my challenge to everyone here, everyone watching online, everyone who will visit this exhibit in years to come. Don't just look at this evidence and say, that's interesting. Let it change you. Let it challenge you. Ask yourself, what lies have I believed? What truths have I avoided? What people have I marginalized, consciously or unconsciously? And then ask, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to be part of healing instead of harm? How am I going to ensure that the next generation, children like my daughter Ruth, grow up in a world that's more just, more honest, more loving than the world we inherited? He stepped back from the podium. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being open to truth. Thank you for being part of this journey. The audience rose in a standing ovation. The applause lasted for several minutes. People wiped tears. Strangers hugged. Something profound had happened in that room, something beyond just a museum opening or a speech. After the ceremony, people lined up to talk to Marcus, to thank him, to share their own stories. And an elderly black man who looked like he might be in his 90s approached with the help of a cane. Are you Professor Williams? The man asked. Yes, sir. I'm the Reverend Samuel Hayes. I marched with Dr. King. I knew your grandmother, Ruth. We were in Selma together in Marcus felt his heart skip. You knew my grandmother? I did. She was fearless. I remember one time the police were beating protesters, and Ruth just stood there singing hymns, refusing to move. They arrested her, but she kept singing even in the police car. Reverend Hayes smiled at the memory. She would be so proud of you. What you've done, revealing this truth about Jesus, it's civil rights work, it's justice work, it's kingdom work. Thank you, Reverend Hayes. That means everything to me. As the evening wore on, Marcus found a quiet corner and pulled out his phone. He opened his photos and looked at pictures from the past 2 years. The tomb in Israel, the Coptic Museum in Egypt, the rock churches in Ethiopia, Father Tekle's smiling face, the ancient manuscripts, the facial imprint on the cloth. But his favorite photo was one Nicole had taken just last week, Marcus holding little Ruth, both of them looking at a painting in their home, a new painting they commissioned showing Jesus with dark brown skin, surrounded by children of every race and ethnicity. Ruth had pointed at Jesus and said, her first full sentence, he looks like Daddy. Yes, Marcus thought, Jesus looked like people, all people, because Jesus came for all people. His phone buzzed. A text from Elon Musk, great speech. Your grandmother would be proud. By the way, Father Tekle passed away this morning, peacefully, surrounded by family. He wanted you to know the truth is free now. His work is done. Marcus felt grief wash over him, but also gratitude. Father Tekle had lived to see the truth recognized, to see African Christianity honored, to see his life's work validated. He died knowing that the ancient knowledge he'd preserved had finally reached the world. And Marcus typed back, thank you for telling me Father Tekle was a great man. We'll honor his memory by continuing the work. Nicole found him in the quiet corner. She sat beside him, taking his hand. You okay? Father Tekle died. Oh, Marcus, I'm so sorry. He lived a full life, 93 years. And He accomplished what he set out to do. Marcus squeezed Nicole's hand. You know what I realized during my speech? This whole journey, the research, the evidence, the controversy, it was never really about proving Jesus was black. It was about proving that everyone matters, everyone has value, everyone belongs in God's story. Nicole rested her head on his shoulder. Your grandmother knew that all along. Yeah, she did? They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the museum slowly emptied. Little Ruth had fallen asleep in a stroller, her small hand clutching the wooden cross Father Tekle had given Marcus in Ethiopia. Marcus thought about all the people whose lives had been touched by this journey. The 90-year-old James Washington, who had felt worthy for the first time. The young Michael, who learned Jesus looked like him. The woman from Kenya, who stopped bleaching her skin. The man from Brazil, who found his place. The girl from India, who came back to church. Millions of people around the world, each one discovering that they mattered, that they were loved, that they were created in God's image. This was the real revelation. Not the color of Jesus' skin, but the truth that all colors matter to God. Not the features of Jesus' face, but the truth that all faces reflect God's image. Not the historical details of Jesus' appearance, but the eternal truth of Jesus' message, love. Veronica stood, helping Nicole to her feet. Together, they pushed Ruth's stroller toward the exit. As they walked, Marcus took one last look at his grandmother's photograph, still sitting in the place of honor. Grandma, he whispered, the truth is free. Your dream is alive. And I promise I'll keep fighting for it. For Ruth, for David, for all the children who need to know they're loved exactly as they are. Outside the museum, the Washington, D.C. evening was cool and clear. Stars shone overhead, the same stars that had shone over ancient Palestine, over medieval Ethiopia, over civil rights marches in the 1960s, over every generation that had fought for truth and justice. Marcus looked up at those stars and smiled. The work would continue. The struggle wasn't over. But tonight, standing with his wife and daughter under those eternal stars, Marcus felt what his grandmother had always promised he would feel. Peace, hope, and the absolute certainty that truth, no matter how long it takes, always finds its way to the light. Always. Professor Marcus Williams, Elon Musk, Dr. Amaro Okonkwo, and Father O'Connor showed us that pursuing truth, even when it's uncomfortable, can heal wounds and restore dignity to millions of people around the world. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. I'm always curious to know where our amazing community is tuning in from across the globe. If you enjoyed this story and found it thought-provoking, please hit that like button. It really helps us reach more people who might benefit from these powerful narratives. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next fascinating story. We create content designed to inspire, educate, and spark meaningful conversations. Share this video with your friends and family. Stories like this one have the power to open minds, start important discussions, and spread both kindness and awareness about issues that truly matter. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, just like Grandmother Ruth always said, the truth always finds its way to the light. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep seeking truth.